is taken away. These are the domain of the Constitution and statute law, and not the standing orders. It must be made clear that the amendments to the standing orders to provide for cabinet secretaries to respond to questions in the House does not override or overturn the requirements of Article 153, 3, and 4B of the Constitution. Cabinet secretaries will still have the obligation to adhere to this article when required by committees of the Senate. Further, Article 125 of the Constitution has similarly not been overturned by the new standing orders. In any event, honorable senators, no statute, regulation, or subsidiary regulation for that matter can override the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land, and any other law that is in contradiction of the Constitution, then to the extent of that contradiction, that law is null and void. And therefore, we place the Constitution as the supreme and mother law. Therefore, the House or any of its committees may invoke its provisions in the discharge of the mandate of the Senate. Honorable Senators, given that this is a new process, I appeal for utmost cooperation from Senators. I urge Senators to familiarize themselves with the new procedure ahead of its application upon resumption of sittings after the short recess pursuant to the calendar. It is my sincere hope that the question tool, aside from statements, petitions, and motion and bills, will enhance our oversight mandate and the executive accountability to Parliament, by extension to the people of this Republic. The House is guided accordingly. I thank you, honorable speakers. Next order.
Order number 3, messages.
Senator Boni Kalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the communication you just made is historical in the sense that you've now made a pronouncement on what will form going forward the most important oversight tool in this Senate, especially
Senator Boni. Just have your seat. I'll come back to you.
Have I?
I have stated on numerous occasions that there is a place for points of order in these standing orders. Kindly look at Standing Order 98 of our standing orders. It is the only standing order that talks about points of order, and it explains when a senator can actually rise on a point of order. If your point of order is not within the provisions of Standing Order 98, then I'm afraid I may not allow you to proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I'm well informed of what you're saying. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you. All I wanted to do, Mr. Speaker, is to request that you shed clarity on a matter which I think is very critical, because, Mr. Speaker, most of the questions from the Senate, unlike in the National Assembly, will lean towards issues devolution. And in the structure of the current government, there is no cabinet secretary for devolution. However, there is a principal secretary in the office of the deputy president responsible for issues of devolution. So I wanted you to clarify Mr. Speaker, sir, whether it will be clear that the Deputy President will be responding to questions that lean towards devolution, and what's more, you clarify whether Chief Administrative Secretaries will have a role, lest they end up being sent here when we do not expect them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni Kalwale, one, that is not a point of order. Secondly, I think when this matter was debated, the amendments were debated and passed on the floor of the House, you were not here. I kindly implore upon you to take time to read the amendments. All the concerns you have, the answers are contained therein. Next order, clerk.
Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
Senator Chirangei. Is there someone holding his brief? So that petition stands deferred. Before clerk holds the next order, honorable senators, allow me to make this further communication. Honorable senators, I would like to acknowledge the presence in the Speaker's Gallery this afternoon, visiting students from University Students Association in Kisumu County. The delegation comprises 35 students who are in the Senate for a one-day academic exposition. Honorable senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator of Kisumu, Senator Boni. You've been in this chamber longer than anyone else, I suppose. When the chair is speaking, when the chair is upstanding, you don't move from your chair. Kindly resume your seat and take this as your first warning for the afternoon. You're out of order. Thank you. I will allow the Senator of Kisumu to make very brief welcoming remarks. Kindly welcome the delegation. The Senator for Siaya, please go ahead. I'm told your other title is the youth leader.
Youth leader for Mr. Speaker, sir, I did not get their delegation from which? From Kisumu, yes, but from
honorable
from
Senator,
which institution?
It's a students' association, University Students Association from Kisumu County.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our tradition as the Senate, I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the delegation from the great county of Kisumu. Mr. Speaker, sir, Kisumu is not only great because it is our headquarters, but Mr. Speaker, it is the entry point into the whole of East Africa. Mr. Speaker, actually it should be the commercial center for the whole of East Africa. And Mr. Speaker, we are very happy to welcome this delegation and hope that during their stay here, they are going to gain something from the debate. This Senate is a very vibrant, and I find it, Mr. Speaker, very interesting because almost every senator, if he wishes to, has an opportunity to speak. Unlike the other house, where the numbers are so high, so great, that you might be there for 5 years and not even be heard. But here, you will hear your senator and you are senator from Kisumu, even though he is on that other side. But he is also a very vocal senator, and I wish he was here himself to speak and welcome you. But however, I'm also a resident of Kisumu. That is where I was born. That's where I grew up, and I take this opportunity to welcome you here. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Next order, clerk.
Order number 5, papers.
Next order. Majority, do you have papers to lay?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I am begged to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, 28th March 2023. Report on the statutory instruments exemption from expiry regulations 2022. I hereby lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Majority leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of the following motion, that notwithstanding the resolution of the Senate on the approval of the Senate calendar made on the 16th February 2023, and noting the resolution of the Senate made on Thursday, the 23rd of March 2023, on the 5th report of the Procedures and Rules Committee on the amendments to the standing orders of the Senate, and pursuant to standing order number 32-4, the Senate resolves to amend its calendar, regular sessions of the Senate for the second session 2023 to provide for morning sittings on Wednesday pursuant to standing order number 34.
Senator Catherine Mumo. Senator Catherine, you're supposed to give a notice of motion, a notice to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to give the following notice of the following motion. Aware that the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development adopted by the United Nations member states in 2015 provides a shared global blueprint aimed at ending poverty, protecting the Earth's environment and climate, and ensuring that people everywhere enjoy peace and prosperity. Appreciating that the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Kenya started by the official launch of the Sustainable Development Goals in Kenya in 2016, followed by the development of the county SDGs roadmap to guide the transition from Millennium Development Goals to SDGs, and the mainstreaming of SDGs at both the national and county governments. Concerned that the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in Kenya has been affected negatively by various shocks such as continued drought since 2019 in Kenya and around the world, serious invasion by desert locusts, the COVID-19 pandemic and other public health calamities, and the current sustained state of the Kenyan economy. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the State Department for Economic Planning in consultation with the Council of Governors, comes up with the reviewed implementation roadmaps for the two levels of government, taking into account the shocks that have impeded or any other that are likely to impede the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I beg to give notice.
Next order, clerk. Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. What is it, Honorable Chair? Notice of motion, adoption of the report of the Select Committee on Delegated Registration on the statutory instruments, exemption from expiry, Regulation 2022, arraigned on the table of the Senate today, Tuesday, 28th March 2022. The Chairperson, Standing Committee on Finance and Budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of the following motions. That the Senate adopt the report of the Select Committee on Delegated Legislation on the statutory instruments exception from expiry, Regulation 2022, read on the table of the Senate on Tuesday, 28th March 2023. Thank you, sir.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Under notices of motion, this is a notice of motion of adjournment to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to give notice of the following motion that pursuant to Standing Order 37, the Senate to adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the deteriorating security situation in the country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Indeed, I do confirm that the senators standing a more than 5 as required by the standing orders, and therefore I do nominate 5:30 to be the time that we'll adjourn to discuss this particular motion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Next order.
Order number 7, statements.
Hezana, he's out on parliamentary duties, and therefore that unless somebody has been nominated by Senator Hezana to act on our behalf, otherwise that statement stands deferred. We'll move to Senator Osotsi.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Finance and Budget regarding the disbursement of funds to county government. In the statement, the committee should, 1, provide an update on the current status of respective counties with regard to the disbursement of funds for development and recurrent expenditure for the financial year 2022-2023. 2, states the reasons for the delay in disbursement of funds to counties from November 2022 to date, despite Senate having passed the disbursement schedule in January 2023. 3, inform the Senate on the status of the execution of the conditional grant that was passed but has not been adhered to. That is at the time of writing this statement. 4, apprise the Senate on the effect of delayed funds disbursement on counties' absorption rates, considering the current financial year ends in June 2023. And finally, 5, state the measures in place, if any, the National Treasury and Economic Planning has taken to ensure timely disbursement of funds to counties for the smooth operation of business and clearance of pending bill. Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious matter. The county which I represent here has not been paying salaries. And this is as a result of late disbursement of funds. It's only last week when we heard that
Senator Osotsi, if you have read the statement, kindly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Senators, the statements hour it started at 3:06. We have 9 statements to be sought. So we are going to attach at most 7 minutes per statement so that we can squeeze everything within the 1 hour that is given to us by the standing orders. Senator Manzo Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this statement. Mr. Speaker, there has been a serious problem in the counties, and there has been delay of monies, which has not been properly explained to the Council of Governors, and there have been very good promises that the monies will be in counties. Mr. Speaker, when salaries of counties are not paid on time, then we run a risk of, workers not be motivated to do their job very well of devolution. And remember, devolution is why we are here. It's a very serious matter. So, Mr. Speaker, I'll be as keen to represent the people of Makueni to make sure that monies reach the county earliest and that the county services are able to proceed as early as possible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Abbas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to support the statement. Mr. Speaker, what has happened in the county is actually a very unfortunate situation. That most of the staff don't receive their salaries in time. The governors are forced to get money from banks on loan, and at times the money is not released even in 4 months or 5 months. In like my country now, for the last 5 months, there was no money that was released. And the workers are not paid. What the government has done now is to get money from the banks. While the national government is paying its own staff on time, the county's staff are not paid on time. Well, these are all the employees of Kenyan governments, whether they come from national government or the county governments. All employees must get their money in time. And therefore, I support the motion, the statement for Mr. Otosi. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Sifuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also rise to give strength to the statement by Senator Osotsi. Mr. Speaker, as you know, I'm a member of the Public Accounts Committee. Just in the past few weeks, Mr. Speaker, 2 counties appeared before us. And one of the most interesting things is that because of the delays in the disbursements of exchequer to the counties, many of the counties are unable to submit or remit their payee obligations. Mr. Speaker, what is interesting, and I'll give the example of the county of Trans Nzoia, which appeared, the county assembly appeared before us last week. Mr. Speaker, in the 2019-2020 financial year, they had failed to submit 7.9 million shillings to payee, to KRA. They were hit with a 16 million shilling penalty and then 2 million shillings in interest, Mr. Speaker, by KRA, the same organization that is supposed to collect and also give them the money. Mr. Speaker, we are in a very, very big problem at the counties, and I wish that we as a Senate can at least find a way to be able to ensure that the resources that are due to the counties are sent there on time. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Wafula.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Ningependa kuunga mkono hoja iliyotolewa na Mheshimiwa Soti. Baadhi ya wanafunzi katika shule za upili na vyuo vikuu na vyuo anuwai wako nyumbani kwa sababu hawana karo, na serikali za kaunti zimeweka wanafunzi hawa katika mfumo wa kuimarisha masomo yao kwa wale ambao ni wachochole kifedha, hivi kwamba serikali ya kitaifa imekosa kuachilia pesa kwenda mashinani, huku tukizingatia kwamba sisi kama Senate na bunge la kitaifa tulitia sahihi na kupitisha kwamba pesa ziteremke. Hivi kwamba ninaunga mkono maoni ama mapendekezo ya Mheshimiwa Otsosi kwamba tuelezwe ni kwa nini kuna kucheleweshwa kwa fedha za kwenda kwenye kaunti, ili hali tunaona mawaziri humu Kenya wakizuru nchi mbalimbali wakipiga picha na video, ili hali wananchi wanapiga miayo na kusaga meno. Asante Mheshimiwa Spika.
Senator Muma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand to support this statement by Senator Osoti. Mr. Speaker, the Senate exists to support county governments. And Mr. Speaker, county public servants are human beings. They are fathers and mothers. They are people with aspirations like those others, like any of us. Mr. Speaker, if our salaries came late, even by a day, that would really hurt us. I think as a Senate, where our voice is not strong enough around advocating for the rights of the public servants in the county governments, Mr. Speaker, I wish to call upon you, members of the Senate, to actually do what it takes for the national government and the relevant institutions to see the point that salaries, wages are actually basic human rights, and they cannot be delayed to the extent that they are being delayed. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Senator Kisang.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I also rise to add my voice. Honorable Speaker, when employees of the county go 3 months without payment, without salaries, that is unfortunate, Honorable Speaker, because there are those who have loans in the bank, they accrue interest, penalties. There are those who feel sick and maybe they want to go to the hospital and NHIF cannot pay for the bed because NHIF deduction would not have been paid. NSSF and pay as you earn. Honorable Speaker, I believe KRA should be the last entity to penalize the counties, because they are the ones who are supposed to be raising the funds, and the funds will be sent to the counties. If they penalize the counties and they're the ones who have not given out the money, then it's unfortunate. So they need to negotiate with the counties. But also this thing of delay should not arise at all, because if the national government employees in the ministries are not getting late salaries, then how come the counties are getting delayed salaries? Honorable Speaker, this is unfortunate, and I support the statement by Honorable Sot.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support this statement, I just wanted to correct that this Senate did not pass the disbursement schedule in January. I think we passed it last year. That's because it runs between July 1st of 2022 to June 30th of 2023. So we may need to correct that issue. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I think it's about time that this Senate moves a motion, and I don't know whether the Finance Committee can consider it when they are considering this report, to be able to compel the Kenya Revenue Authority to only
penalize counties and any other entity that the exchequer has released money on time. We have issues that when the exchequer failed to release money, counties, these statutory reductions end up accruing a lot of interest and penalties. So, Mr. Speaker, that's an issue that I may want to request that the committee also look into that issue. Number two, Mr. Speaker, I believe we passed the additional revenue disbursement schedule when we passed the new Additional Revenue Act to counties. If the regular shareable revenue has not been disbursed and the additional revenue has not been disbursed, we're having a serious problem. And this financial year is slowly coming to an end. So we don't want to carry the money forward or the debt forward or the exchequer releases forward when this year's money has not been released. This will continue increasing the pending bills. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I may want to request you to find it within yourself to expedite or to direct that this matter be dealt with immediately. You know, even in circumstances where we have a committee of the whole, so that we can then convert. I'm still not convinced about the changes in the standing orders, but I will go with it, that we can convert this House into a committee of the whole and have the Cabinet Secretary in charge of Treasury respond as to the delays in the exchequer releasing funds to the counties. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
AC.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also want to join my colleague senators in supporting the statement by Senator Utsosi. Currently, as it is, all development projects have stalled. And when development projects stall, it's like we are now fighting or clawing back on devolution. Several years later, after the devolution was effected, every single day, whatever that is happening is like it's clawing back on devolution. And as a Senate, I think we are not biting enough. It's time to bite and clearly show we are here speaking on behalf of ordinary citizens out there who are relying on these services to go down to the smallest level at the grassroots. Late disbursement means the issue of tenders being awarded will come late and people will then be paid late on when there's no money or money has already been allocated to other functions. So, Senator Utsosi, this is timely. It's also an opportunity for the Senate to get answers from some of these cabinet secretaries because we amended the standing orders to allow them showing up here so that we have prompt responses and services get closer to the people who have us in this Senate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We'll move to the next statement. The Honorable Senator Edwin Sifuna.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources on the issue of illegal and irregular misallocation of public community land in Buruburu Phase 5 Estate on Katul Road, Nairobi Block 79/789. In the statement, the committee should explain the circumstances under which the said parcel of land, which was meant for public utility and open spaces, was allocated to individuals and state the identities of the beneficiaries. Secondly, they should cause the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission to conduct an investigation into the into the allegations of illegal allocation of public utility plots and open spaces in Buruburu Estate. State the measures, if any, being implemented by the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development to ensure that if public utility land is to be allocated to private developers, evaluation is undertaken to ascertain the value of the private development outweighs the value of the public development. And finally, outline steps taken by the Nairobi City County Government to reverse the illegal acquisition and to safeguard public utility land from grabbing in the future.
You have to
Yes.
request.
May I
Kindly
proceed?
proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 53.1, I seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Land, Environment and Natural Resources regarding claims of illegal allocation of public utility plots and open spaces within Woodley Estate, Nairobi City County. In the statement, the committee should explain the current status of public utility plots and empty spaces within Woodley Estate and provide records of how the same are currently being managed by the Nairobi City County Government. Secondly, give a status report on the revocation of titles that had been issued following illegal allocation of the same land, stating what the county government is doing to ensure that land is reverted back to the county. And finally, outline the measures that have been put in place by the Nairobi City County Government, if any, to ensure that these public utility plots and open spaces are not illegally allocated and or obtained. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Tabitha Mutinda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the statement by Senator Sifuna, Senator of Nairobi. And as a delegation of Nairobi, I support because one, Buruburu is an area and an estate that for long has been a very good estate region. And it really saddens that at this particular time, we still have pending issues as far as land double allocations is concerned, land grabbing is concerned in this city. These allocations, Mr. Speaker, of public utility usually help put social amenities like social halls, police stations, even schools that our children and also the community is able to utilize and use in their different times of need. And so I support and urge that the Land Committee takes up this matter, very urgent, and the public land that belongs to the community, that belongs to the government, should be reverted back. This issue of private investors who have decided not to work hard and just invest on grabbing what is not theirs is a high time, and especially on land issues in this Nairobi, that should be reverted back and utilized in the manner that should be utilized. So I support Senator Sifuna's statement, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Senator Oburu.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to support the statement being sought by Honorable Sifuna, Senator for Nairobi. Because, Mr. Speaker, this disease called grabiosis is such a serious disease in our country that you find leaders are so greedy of seizing any empty land. Sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I used to hear, I was told by a pilot when I was flying in a chopper that there are some leaders, when they are carried in the chopper and they see any open land, they want to stop, they tell the pilot, can you take the coordinates of this area? We want to know who is the owner so that they can come and grab that land, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a disease which we must find a way of dealing with. Mr. Speaker, the appetite is even growing. I think even in this system here, it has increased. The appetite has increased even more than before. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this statement being sought by Honorable Sifuna. And let us see how we can tame this disease called grabiosis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We shall move to the next statement. Senator Murgo. That statement is deferred. Senator Alexander Mundigi.
A statement on the status
Senator Essie.
Yes.
I know your name. Certainly you're not Senator Alexander Mundigi.
he requested that I
Then
read on
start
his...
by placing yourself properly on record.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm reading this statement on behalf of Senator Alexander Munyi Mudigi, Senator for Embu County. Request for a statement on the state of macadamia nut production and marketing. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries on the state of macadamia nut production and marketing in Kenya. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state the justification for the blanket ban on export of raw macadamia nuts issued by the government in 2009 and indicate whether there are any plans to lift the ban. 2, state measures that have been put in place by the government, if any, to avoid price fluctuations of raw macadamia nuts, which at times yields as little as 30 shillings per kilogram. 3, outline the steps the government is taking to support the macadamia sector in terms of research, funding, and marketing initiatives to ensure Kenya's competitiveness in the global macadamia market. 4, provide information on whether local macadamia nut companies have the capacity to process and market the nuts for the small-scale farmers. And finally, inform the Senate of the steps being taken to boost income from exports in a free market, considering the Agricultural and Food Authority has lowered the per kilogram price of the nuts from 200 shillings to 30 shillings. The other statement is a request for statement on the status of Horticultural Crops Directorate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53-1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Agriculture, Livestock and Fisheries on the status of Horticultural Crops Directorate under the Agriculture and Food Authority. In the statement, the committee should, 1, state the measures, if any, put in place by the government to sustain growth and allow stakeholders in the horticultural subsector identify and establish a direct link with their regulator. 2, inform the Senate whether Agriculture and Food Authority has adequate resources to manage and oversee the horticultural subsector, considering that it oversees several other directorates. 3, give reasons for the abolishment of the Horticultural Research Fund and the weakened staff capacity of the Horticultural Crops Directorate by FA. And finally, explain how FA manages perishable horticultural value chains requiring timely decisions and the losses they incur, detailing the constitution process of the FA board so as to protect the interest of the horticultural stakeholders. Senator Alexander Munyi Mudigi, Senator for Embu County.
Senator Manzo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of the Agriculture Committee, and there's a law which has been proposed by the chairman in touching on the macadamia and other nuts, which came to our committee today. This law is now going for public participation, for publication and public participation. Mr. Speaker, we realize that unless with the permission of the Cabinet Secretary, you cannot market nuts outside the country. And this has caused chaos. And that particular permission is a serious problem. I also today requested our Secretariat to do a little bit of research as to why, Section 43 of AFA Act, what was the wisdom behind that provision before we amend it, so that we can open up, so that the nuts can be sold directly by the farmers. And we are growing nuts in Makueni, in areas called Boni, Kilungu, all these macadamia nuts, and the whole of coastal region seems to have been gotten into a problem of marketing their nuts because of this particular provision. And consequently, brokers have carried all the nuts to be processed somewhere around Thika, and then now they are marketed to the world as they please. Mr. Speaker, we want farmers to market directly. But I'm aware there is a cycle, there are standards required under different legislation, and therefore we want to really know what informed that legislation so that this House can amend that law and open the market to the world, and that our farmers, Mr. Speaker, can benefit. We really hope Senate is going to be useful to farmers of all nuts, including macadamia nuts. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also arise to support the statement. Mr. Speaker, this statement is specifically on macadamia, and there is need for the ministry in charge to see how best they can facilitate farmers, to strengthen and to enhance production and marketing of the particular farm produce. Mr. Speaker, this is an agricultural country. Our economy, Mr. Speaker, is really supported by agriculture. In areas, Mr. Speaker, like Rio Valley, we have the cotton being grown in those areas. And I think it is time, Mr. Speaker, as we focus on macadamia, it is also equally important for the committee to look at specific areas in this country where very specialized crops like cotton, which, Mr. Speaker, initially used to be a very, very a big commercial produce in Rio Valley. Today, it is in the minimum in terms of production. Mr. Speaker, if as a country and as a ministry in charge of farming or agriculture is able to zone our country and see the specific areas and enhance production for the crops grown in those areas, I think the country, Mr. Speaker, will go a long way. We are doing so well about improving and giving subsidy to farmers for maize. We have now, again, reform in the sector of coffee and tea. And little focus, Mr. Speaker, is given to some of these crops which are not very spread in our country. I think it is important for the committee in charge of this to also look at some of the areas and some of the produce, some of the farmings in areas like Rio Valley, as I've said, and focus on cotton, which is equally a very, very important product in our sector. Mr. Speaker, it's a good question, and I support.
Senator Ledama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a couple of days ago, I was being translated a small video clip where the distinguished senator of Kirinyaga was crying because of the way his farmers have been terrorized by brokers. And as soon as I saw that, I went ahead and I started doing some research on why the distinguished senator was really perturbed. And I realized that, Mr. Speaker, that sometimes we make legislation that kills this economy and promote brokers or cartels or a cabal. Mr. Speaker, as we sit now, about 90% of the crop, macadamia, which is produced in Kenya, is for export. And when I heard my good friend, the senator from Makueni, Senator Manzo, saying that Kenyans cannot produce and sell directly to the export market, I wonder, what exactly are we doing? So, Mr. Speaker, I hope that when you commit that to the Committee of Agriculture, the first thing they will do is to bring that piece of legislation called AFA, which was passed in 2009, and I think it was passed by a few cartels, and amend that act. Currently, Mr. Speaker, Kenya is the second largest producer of macadamia and the third largest producer in the world. In Africa, is the second and the third in the world. There's no reason as to why people in Kirinyaga should not be dancing all the way to the bank with billions of shillings. The prices that they are being given, Mr. Speaker, currently the world price is between 90 shillings and 120 shillings a kilo. My colleague here was lamenting that the farmers are being given up to 20 shillings a kilo. So I think some of these things are the ones that are killing this economy. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like the committee to explore and carry out a serious survey of how many farmers in all the 47 counties, and particularly the counties in the central region that are growing the macadamia, are actually growing this macadamia. We are talking about increasing value addition. I know my colleague was lamenting because one company in Naivasha, which sells macadamia, sells a small packet for about maybe 1,000 shillings. But I think we need to find a way that even the Ministry of Agriculture can be able to bring these farmers together. The current Cabinet Secretary of Agriculture is a former colleague. He can bring these farmers together and ensure that, number one, those farmers are allowed to export the nuts directly to other countries. I mean, currently, Mr. Speaker, some of us are exporting products without having to seek authority from the Cabinet Secretary. Why should we then, set aside a particular crop just to benefit a cabal? So, Mr. Speaker, this is a fantastic statement, and I fully support it, and I hope that we can be able to help our farmers resolve the problem. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Morango.
Asante sana mstahiki Spika kwa kunipa nafasi hii. Kwanza ningetaka pia unipe mwelekeo kwa sababu mwenye kuuliza swali ni naibu yangu katika kamati ya Agriculture. Unieleze kama mtu anafaa kujiuliza swali kwa sababu lile swali lililoulizwa na Alexander Munyi Mundigi kama naibu mwenyekiti itakuja pia kwake ama kwetu. Ya pili ni kwamba ningali nangojea hayo pia ambayo imeulizwa ni ya maana sana. Kwa sababu juzi tu ambapo nilikuwa nalalamikia hilo jambo kama venye seneta Wanaro Kolendama amesema. Na nilipokuwa nikitaka kufanya uchunguzi wangu nilienda ndukani ambalo liko huko makandamia inakuwa. Na kwanza hili swala linahusisha makandamia, korosho na bigza. Na tukiangalia sana makandamia na hizi vitu nimetanja, ukienda kama Rift Valley, nilikuwa naongea pia na seneta Wafula Wakoli akiniambia katika eneo la Tongaren pia wako na shinda kama hizi kwa kununuliwa makandamia kwa bei ya shilingi 20. Mstahiki Spika, nilienda dukani kapata ya kwamba gramu 150 ya makandamia inauzwa kwa shilingi 505. Ukipiga hesabu vizuri ni kusema wenye wanafinya wakulima wanawanulia shilingi 20 ama 30, lakini ile kilo moja wanaiuza 3,600. Ningetaka niseme ya kwamba pia hizi sheria ambazo zimetungwa ningetaka kusema kwamba zina ubaguzi fulani. Kwa sababu katika ile mimea yote ambayo imewekwa kufuatilizwa ile sheria ni makandamia, ile pyrethrum, cashew nut na mbigza. Hiyo mimea ingine yote ya wakulima hakuna hata moja unahitajika kuomba ruhusa kwa mtu yeyote kuuza. Na ningetaka pia niseme katika ile sheria hapa iletwa 43 mwaka wa 2016 ilikuja tu ikafungia tu wakulima wa makandamia, korosho na mbigza na pyrethrum. Mstahiki Spika, ni vibaya sana mkulima kupanda miti ikimaliza miaka 10 anakuja kununuliwa makandamia katika shilingi 20 peke yake. Kitambo kidogo pale kulikuwa na Wachina ambao walikuwa wanakuja humu kununua makandamia. Bei ya makandamia ilikuwa inatoka kilo moja shilingi 180. Miaka kama 4 imeisha. Sasa tunashangaa hata mahali ya kuuza hakuna kwa sababu kampuni 5 zimeungana, wameketi chini, wamefinya bei ya makandamia na korosho na mbigza mpaka shilingi 20 na 30. Na kwa hivyo mstahiki Spika, nimechangia hata kama hiyo swali nitajiuliza mwenyewe, nitajibu kisawasawa. Asante sana.
Thank you, Senator Morango. Indeed, Senator Mundigi is in order for him to seek a statement of that committee, although he's a member of the committee. because there's a difference between Mundigi, the senator of Embu, and the Departmental Committee of Agriculture. We shall move to the next question. The next statement. That is by Senator Samson Chirange. That statement is deferred because of the fact that Senator Chirange is not present. We shall move to Senator James Murango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Trade, Industrialization and Tourism regarding the marketing of Kenyan produce in foreign markets. In the statement, the committee should state the measures, if any, that the government has put in place to ensure marketing of Kenya produce by the Kenyan missions abroad. 2, explain the measures, if any, that the government has put in place to control import of goods produced locally and to increase demand for the local produce. And 3, state the measures, if any, put in place by the government to market Kenyan goods like tea, coffee, horticultural produce to increase the volume of exports. I have another statement, Mr. Speaker. Under Standing Order 53, I stand to seek a statement from the Standing Committee of Trade, Industries. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I think thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise pursuant to Standing Order 53.1 to seek a statement from the Standing Committee on Labour and Social Welfare on the state of labour export from Kenya. In the statement, the committee should, 1, explain the measures the government has taken, if any, to reduce unemployment among the youths. 2, explain the steps taken by the Minister of Labour and Social Protection to facilitate Kenyans applying for job opportunities abroad. 3, appraise the Senate on whether there are any bilateral agreements in place with any foreign country or organization for the export of both skilled and unskilled labor. And 4, provide data on the current state of labor export to foreign countries, including the number of Kenyans working abroad and the amount of remittance received annually. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, before I give opportunity to senators to make their interventions on that request for statement, allow me to make the following communication. In the public gallery, we have 90 students accompanied by 3 teachers from Lenana School in Nairobi County who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. In the public gallery again, we have 31 students accompanied by 2 teachers from Kemugumo Girls High School in Kirinyaga County who are in the Senate on an education tour. In our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow the Senator for Nairobi and the Senator for Homa Bay to make brief welcoming remarks on, to welcome the students from Lenana, and I will also allow the Senator for Kirinyaga, the Honorable Murango, to make brief welcoming remarks to welcome the delegation from Kemugumo Girls High School, in that order.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to welcome the students from Lenana. Unfortunately, I can see a few of them are remaining, Mr. Speaker, because I know they wear maroon, gray, and white, so the colors were a bit confusing for me. Mr. Speaker, this is one of the earliest schools in terms of high schools in Kenya, having been founded in 1949. And when I was told they were here, I was trying to do a cursory search of some of the prominent members or alumni of that school. I didn't come across the Homa Bay Senator's name, but he assures me that he went to Lenana School. So he will tell us, Mr. Speaker, and I've also been informed that in this house there is also a dropout from Lenana School. And, Mr. Speaker, I will introduce himself. I don't, but he's the one who confessed to me that he dropped out of Lenana School. But Mr. Speaker, it is good to hear that you know, the Senator for Homa Bay is one of them, because at least you know, the names that were coming up were a bit scary. Wafula Chebukati, Professor Kindiki, Joe Musheru, and Sakaja Johnson, the current governor of Nairobi. So at least the Senator for Homa Bay will have nice things to say. Mine is to welcome them to the Senate and to assure them that I have had a conversation with the current governor of Nairobi, who is an alumnus of the school. Mr. Speaker, this school is located in Dagoretti South, and you have to make a U-turn on Ngong Road before you get into the school. And there's a very bad section of road between Ngong Road and the school gate. But because he's an alumni, he has assured me that he will be able to resolve the question of that road once and for all before his term ends. So, Mr. Speaker, I wish them all the best during their tour. And just like their motto says, nothing but the best. I've chosen the English version, Mr. Speaker, because the Latin one might give me problems knowing that I'm a member of the Mulembe Nation. So, nothing but the best. You must always insist on that, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that they have a fruitful tour. I thank you, Chair.
Mr. Speaker, I join you and the House in welcoming the boys from Lenana School. We are called Libons. We are also called Changerians, because changes you. And Mr. Speaker, as Senator Sifuna has alluded, in this House there's a gentleman who spent only one term in changes, and he could not stand the English pies that we used to eat and the loaves of bread that we used to eat. And so he went to a school in Western Kenya, in Chavakali, where he could get sweet potatoes and yams and arrowroots, because those could not be found at Lenana School. Mr. Speaker, this House has had the privilege of hosting a few Changerians. Yours truly is a Changerian, Block 5, James House. Mr. Speaker, Professor Kindiki, who in his lucid moments is a very good man. Mr. Speaker, we have also had Senator Hassan Omar. We have also had in this House, Mr. Speaker.
What is your point of order, Senator Boni?
Speaker, did you hear the Senator of Homa Bay refer to the Cabinet Secretary using derogatory language and parliamentary language? To the extent, Mr. Speaker, that he suggests there are times when he's lucid and out of. Mr. Speaker, is that parliamentary? And even if you're saying aye, you have said aye.
Senator Kajwang, that was uncalled for. Kindly proceed to lift it out of your pronunciation today and conclude your welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let them be wonderful welcoming.
Professor Kindiki is generally a wonderful guy, generally. Mr. Speaker, I want to, through you, just encourage the boys from Changes.
Kindly withdraw the lucid moment.
Mr. Speaker, I will withdraw it. Perhaps his lucidity is 99.9% of the time.
Proceed to conclude your remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the boys from Changes, through the chair, I want to encourage them that let Changes change you from boys to men, and real men at that. Let Changes change you from villagers to nationalists. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the political landscape, there's quite a number of Changerians, as well as a number of Busherians, and to the boys in the gallery, the chair of this House is a Busherian, and I think a very polished one. And Mr. Speaker, earlier on I was complaining that perhaps the clerk of the House, who is an old boy of Starehe, perhaps didn't want the Changerians to be acknowledged. And I withdraw those earlier allegations. Mr. Speaker, how I wish that many members, even in this House, would have had the privilege of going to Changes. Because sometimes you hear some villageness, sometimes you hear some things that good schooling would have been able to squeeze out. And The boys from Changes, please keep it up. This is a wonderful school. Keep the rose bright ye emblem. Please go for nothing but the best. As we say, nihil praeter optimum. And I hope that some of you will find your way here. But as I always say, I don't think we need more politicians in this country. A lot of Changerians are doing excellent work in the private sector, in government, and I want to encourage you that don't just think of Kenya. The world is your village. If you've gone to a school that was called the Duke of York, if you've gone to a school with a kind of finesse and a school that produces gentlemen like Lenana School, then Kenya should not be your playground. Let the world be your playground. Remember that Elon Musk, who is the richest man in the world currently, was educated in South Africa. Remember that people like Mark Shuttleworth, who have been able to build crafts that take us to space, and who was responsible for building some very innovative Linux operating systems, came from Africa. And remember that this is a country that produced Wangari Maathai. So please do not aspire just to be in Kenya. And Mr. Speaker, my observation is that this House has never had someone from Nairobi School. And that is quite interesting, Mr. Speaker. You know, Nairobi School and Lenana are traditional rivals. But if you go to county assemblies, there are a lot of people from Nairobi School. So that tells you the kind of outcome and output you get from Changes. Nihil praeter optimum. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Murango.
Asante sana Mstahiki Spika kwa kunitunuku nafasi hii kuwakaribisha wanafunzi wa kutoka Kiamugumo Ngaos. Kiamugumo Ngaos iko Gichugu. Na Mstahiki Spika, hiyo shule iko mahali ambapo Gavana Kirinyaga ametoka, gavanani wa Iguru. Na ningetaka kusema ya kwamba mnapofanya kutia bidii na kutia fora katika masomo yenu, muko na watu ambao wako mbele ambao wanamuonyesha kwamba masomo ni muhimu na mnaweza mkiweka bidii mtaenda mbali sana. Mimi hapa Mstahiki Spika, shule ambayo nilisomea huwa nasema mimi ndo nilikuwa mwanafunzi pekee. Kwa sababu sikuwa na nafasi ya kwenda shule kama Lenana ama shule ambayo ina wanafunzi wengi na mwalimu mmoja. Na kwa hivyo hiyo ni historia ambayo nitapeana siku nyingine. Kwa sababu Mstahiki Spika, pia kuwa mwalimu mmoja ukiwa mwanafunzi mmoja na shule unaanzia huko peke yako, pia ni kusema unatunga sheria pamoja na mwalimu. Hiyo pia inasaidia mahali yake. Kwa hivyo ningewakaribisha wanafunzi, najua tukimaliza hapa tutaonana pale nje. Tuna desturi tunayofanya watu wa Kirinyaga, na washukuru na mkaribishe na kumkaribisha siku ya leo, mtasoma mengi. Asanteni sana.
Back to the statement by the Honorable Senator Murango. Senator Mungatana.
So, Speaker, I wanted to make a contribution on the statement by Senator Murango that is directed at the Trade Committee. Mr. Speaker, as they look on ways, as the committee explores to answer the statement in terms of placing our produce in foreign markets, Mr. Speaker, I want the committee to also recall that in November 2022, President Ramaphosa was in Kenya for bilateral talks with the head of state here. And Mr. Speaker, it emerged clearly that the trade imbalance between South Africa and Kenya is great, because we are doing $39 million, they are doing $615 million. But the indication, Mr. Speaker, was that there is space for Kenya to export meat and meat products to South Africa because they are in deficit on that side. So, Mr. Speaker, as they look at produce of Kenyan goods in foreign markets, can the Trade Committee also look at where we are? Because that was a clear offer. What have we done to take advantage of that space that was granted to us. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the statement by Senator Murango of Kenyan County, where he is seeking information from the Committee on Labor and Social Welfare. And I thought, Mr. Speaker, that I may need to add my voice on that, because it is true that we are exporting labor to especially the Middle East, Mr. Speaker, and that this can be a very important job market for us, because we need foreign exchange, Mr. Speaker, that is in short supply. And I think that if our government makes government-to-government arrangements and agreements with those other countries where we export labor, including but not limited to domestic servants. Mr. Speaker, in this country, we also have trained doctors, medical doctors for that matter, that do not have jobs. And I know that their services are in high demand in other countries, Mr. Speaker. And so in supporting Senator Murango's statement, Mr. Speaker, I think we should look at that very seriously so that we may be able to arrest or reduce unemployment in our country, Mr. Speaker, and so that when our people go out there to offer their services, that they will be protected, their rights will be protected, and actually they may be able to be paid in the way and manner that they are supposed to be paid, that they may not be exploited. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would also urge the government to, like I started by saying, to see to it that they make bilateral arrangements and agreements with the concerned countries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Senator Muma.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support Senator Murango's statement to the Committee on Trade. Mr. Speaker, that statement has come in other versions in previous Senates. Mr. Speaker, it is my view that this country does not value farmers. Mr. Speaker, the farmer who elects to plant avocado will find a broker who wants to take an avocado for as little as 8 shillings or 10 shillings and go and sell it for a lot of money. That is what is happening to macadamia farmers. That is what is happening to maize farmers. That is what is happening to sugarcane farmers. And Mr. Speaker, even before we came to this house, for some of us who are here for the first time, this narrative has always been in this house. Is there something that the Senate or the government can do seriously to support farmers? Because when you make a loss, then you decide to cut down all those trees. Coffee trees have been brought down, Mr. Speaker. Tea trees have been brought down, Mr. Speaker, because a few people wanted to exploit the farmers. Mr. Speaker, beyond what has been asked, I request that that committee look at radical solutions, including the possibility of setting up teams that can give minimum price that farmers should be given on the different products within the agricultural sector. I stand to support. Thank you very much.
Senator Veronica.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. I rise to support the statement sought by Senator Murango from the Standing Committee on Labor and Social Welfare, while noting that labor export is a strategy that has been utilized by many developing countries, Mr. Speaker, to tackle the issue of unemployment and underemployment, Mr. Speaker. And if I can quote one example, the nation of Philippines is one of the best labor export nations and has a model that has enabled it to export labor to over 200 nations across the globe. And Mr. Speaker, the kind of income they are earning foreign exchange they're earning is close to USD $17 billion, Mr. Speaker, because of exporting labor, expert labor to different nations, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I would add a voice that the government must then be called to account to indicate how fast the passports are being issued to young people who are seeking for employment outside the nation of Kenya, how quick it is to certify their academic credentials and qualifications, Mr. Speaker, and to enhance any process that stands between the young people and that labor being exported even to the region, Mr. Speaker. And we must note also, Mr. Speaker, that Kenya has actively supported many nations across the region which have not been stable in years to maybe enhance service delivery in the nations, in Somalia, in DRC, in Sudan, and many other nations, and time has come for that area to be closed out so that we can have many more youths employed out there and earning income from outside there. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mutinda Tabitha.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do rise to support the statement by the Senator of Kirinyaga, Senator Murango, on the issue that is supposed to be tabled at the Labour Committee. And I want to say that, one, the issue of job opportunities in this country is very important. And our youths, we've seen they've really tried very hard to acquire certifications, to acquire credentials. And like everybody, Mr. Speaker, everybody has dreams, and they've had dreams to be able to pursue their careers in different parts of this world. And I support, Mr. Speaker, by also urging that through the ambassadors, the different ambassadors in different countries, especially in the UAE, that we should get, data in terms of which are the students, or who are the Kenyans who are in these different foreign countries, and at the same time, what jobs are they doing, what database that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have, and what does the ambassador have in that particular foreign country? What certifications are they being offered? Last week, I'm happy that my colleagues were able to support my statement on where I inquired in terms of the education, the knowledge, the technology that the institutions are offering to different courses that students will go abroad and acquire jobs, especially the household jobs, among many other technical jobs. That does not also limit the other levels of education that our colleagues, our Kenyans have also gone abroad to get jobs on. So it is very important to be able to understand and be able, through this understandability, we are able also to gauge what do we add on, what is it that we can actually improve on as a country, so that we open more doors to our youths, our Kenyans who want to work out there. Also, what has been the impact from the people who've actually worked in abroad in terms of what they've invested back, and in a nutshell, Mr. Speaker, to be able to open more doors for our Kenyans in the different diaspora levels. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I also wanted to add my voice on the issue of labor as sought by the Senator Murango. I think that, Mr. Speaker, we have artificial construct by the issues of having borders in among our countries, to the extent that economic mobility of labor is need-based, to the extent that if anybody doesn't have a job in a country like ours, they will look for that job from wherever they can. But some complexities do emerge that makes it impossible for them. One of those I know that my sister Tabitha has talked about, but I wanted to even make it better, which is the issue of data. You know, when it comes to the issue of labor in this country, the issue of data for decision making becomes very difficult. And I wanted to just strengthen that idea of being able to have robust data that can be able to highlight, one, those people who do not have jobs in the country that are seeking jobs abroad, or who have got mismatch in terms of jobs that we have in the country and are seeking jobs abroad, vis-a-vis those who are able to get them and why they can be able to get them. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I would actually want to urge that this committee considers even encouraging the relevant ministries to be able to make data availability a public thing that can be able to even be brought to the media, so that when we have got data on labor that is seeking work abroad, this can even be broadcasted more broadly, so that people can be able to see what is going on in other places. But more close to this, and that's very close to my heart, Mr. Speaker, is just the idea of complexities around people who are abroad, who work and then want their monies in terms of remittances to come to their local households and families to be able to transform their lives. Because when people go to work abroad, they go to work to be able to change their lives, but also more importantly, to solve the needs of their communities down here. So one of the reasons why it becomes very difficult for labor to be mobile is the idea that when the remittances are coming, they're very expensive to the extent that they cannot be able to do some of the development that they want to do back at home or help their families. And this is where I think that the committee should consider some of the most adventurous ways to innovate around making some of our companies locally, like Safaricom, be global brands. Because Safaricom has become a very serious finance giant in the global financial systems, to the extent that if as a country we purpose, like countries like South Korea that purpose to make their companies like Samsung global brands. Imagine if Safaricom was a global brand today, all the remittances that we are getting in terms of billions outside, the families that we have outside that are working outside will be able to make them in a cheaper way that makes labor have powerful sense to local communities. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, I think that Kenya should be able to start thinking in a more serious way around our immigration laws, to the extent that when you look at the mobility of labor, one of the biggest problems is the issues of visas and the issues of getting passports. I think that we should be able to make it easier for people who are looking for jobs abroad to get their passports in an easier way. But in a reciprocal matter, we can also be able to consider making countries that have got some opportunities for our people as much as possible visa-free, so that this kind of bilateral agreements on issues of visa can make it possible for us to invite good talent in the country, but also us being able to export any kind of talent that we want in other countries. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support Senator Murango, and I hope that the committee will consider some of these ideas to incorporate in their statement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Seki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I also rise to support the motion from Senator Murango on the issue of marketing of Kenya produce in foreign markets. This statement has come in the right time when we are deliberating on the issues of foreign markets, particularly on the trade agriculture. This afternoon, I attended a forum that is called Global Gap Tour, which the agriculture sector and the producers in Kenya are discussing together with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Trade, how to bring up more certification of Kenya producers and Kenya products to the foreign markets. So I think it has come to in the right time, when we understand that what matters a lot in issues of foreign markets is issues like standards of our produce or products. Secondly, is the issue of certification to the foreign markets. as you know, Speaker, the Kenya government or the Kenya is leading also in the issues of certification in Africa, in issues on issues concerning market horticulture products. As I can tell this Senate that Kenya has 323 certificate holders on foreign markets, and that means that we are behind South Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, and South Africa and Morocco, and even Egypt. So I think we have a lot, and the ministry has a lot, and to certify our producers and our farmers to get the certification that is required for us to be able to sell more products in the foreign markets. More importantly, I want to tell that the products that are leading in Kenya are avocado, mango, tomatoes, and sweet potatoes. And the kind of product that has been raised today, like macadamia, is not there. It's not listed in the list of products that is being produced in or being exported to foreign markets. So I think we have a lot as a department, and I want to assure this Senate that as we deliberate on this matter, we are going to look at it and engage different stakeholders to make sure that the statement has been achieved, or the objective of the statement has been achieved. Otherwise, I want to support the motion and say that we are going to look at it as a committee. Thank you.
Before I call upon the majority leader to make a statement, allow me, honorable senators, to make this communication. In the public gallery, we have 64 students, accompanied by 7 teachers from Lona Laboso Memorial Girls Secondary School in Bomet County, who are in the Senate on an education tour. Honorable senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate, on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I will allow, do you have the Senator for Bomet in the, I will allow Senator for Bomet, Wakili Sigei, to make very brief welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to welcome the students from Bomet County. Lona Laboso Girls is a memorial school that was established courtesy of the first female member of parliament for the constituency called Sotik. In the year 2012, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable, the late Joyce Laboso actualized the institution now, which is represented by the beautiful girls in the gallery today. Mr. Speaker, I want to welcome them and encourage them to carry the flag, which was carried by the first female MP whose name is inscribed in the institution that they represent today. Similarly, to carry high the flag of the first female governor of Bomet County, the late Joyce Laboso, who actualized the institution. This is a house where rules are made. Honorable Joyce Laboso was a deputy speaker in the National Assembly. I am very sure and convinced that the spirit that she had and the investment that she made in the institution that you are in now will be carried higher by you. And I want to encourage you to work hard, celebrate the 2 beautiful names that you carry in the school, and show the world and Bomet County at large that indeed the 2 ladies are great ladies and you want to emulate them in your future. I welcome you to the Senate. I also ask you to enjoy every moment of it and learn so that you carry back home the new and important lessons that you've picked from this House. Mr. Speaker, I thank you and I encourage them to learn more than just being here.
Senator Ledama, what is your point of order? Senator Cheriot, Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise pursuant to Standing Order number 57-2 to make a statement on the occasion of the 10-year anniversary of the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, I expected if senators were concentrating to applaud that this House has lived to see its 10th birthday, the second session of the Senate. It's not by chance, Mr. Speaker, or rather guaranteed that this House, given the kind of challenges that we've had over the years, both from within and without, that we'll live to see these days. On March the 28th, 2013, the Senate of the Kenya held an inaugural sitting, technically marking the second Senate after the first Senate under the Independence Constitution was disbanded in 1967, and the first Senate under the 2010 Constitution. This second Senate, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of Speaker Right Honorable Ekwe Othuro, EGH MP, marked one of the most significant milestones in the country's constitutional history. The coming into being of the Senate heralded a new dawn for our legislature, hitherto unicameral, and was now comprising the National Assembly and the Senate. The term of the second Senate ran from 28 March 2013 to the 15th of June 2017, Mr. Speaker. Needless to say this, that the Senate was sailing in uncharted waters. None of the political leadership and the senators who had earlier had a clear idea of what their task entailed. They had to learn how to swim by actually swimming. It was trial and error at first. However, the Speaker and his leadership team guided the unity of purpose and the will to actualize devolution, initiated work, systems, and spearheaded a series of retreats, workshops, and seminars that rapidly crafted the framework of transacting and administering the Senate. Mr. Speaker, sir, to entrench its place, the Senate began its mandate by fighting for its space and its place in the new organization of government, including its relationship with the National Assembly, in executing its mandate as contained in Article 96 of the Constitution. To name just but a few of those memorable times, in the 11th Parliament was an entrenching mandate of the Senate in the consideration of the annual Division of Revenue Bill, a matter that was eventually determined by the Supreme Court in favor of the Senate, the infamous advisory opinion number 1 of 2013. The second Senate, among other milestones, Mr. Speaker, set in place the procedure to be followed upon the receipt of resolution from a county assembly on the impeachment by assembly of a governor or a deputy governor. This marked the stage for the first impeachment hearing of a county governor, which happened in 2014. Mr. Speaker, sir, the term of the third Senate in the 12th Parliament commenced on 31st August 2017, with 67 elected senators taking the oath of office and electing the Right Honorable Ken Lusaka, MP, as Speaker. The third Senate represents the consolidation stage of the Senate. Some fundamental achievements of the third Senate include the determination of matters such as the admissibility and constitutionality of the powers of a deputy governor in running county government business, where the governor is charged in court or is away for extended periods due to other reasons. Other fundamental achievements include measures to resolve the stalemate on the delayed enactment of Division of Revenue Bill and its impact on the county finances, and the implication of the High Court judgment on the Constitutional Petition 284 of 2019 that challenged the laws that were enacted and procedural. That remains to be one of our memorable days of this House, Mr. Speaker, last Parliament, when we all walked hand in hand from
right here in the Senate chambers, all the way to Milimani Law Courts. And I see many colleagues in the House today who made the infamous march, Mr. Speaker. That day secured our place in history, Mr. Speaker. Had we not pushed back on an executive fully backed by the National Assembly that was keen on extinguishing this House, Mr. Speaker, I am not sure whether we'd be here gathered this afternoon, Mr. Speaker. I celebrate all the senators that joined us on that graceful march that morning. Mr. Speaker, sir, in the third Senate, we initiated inaugural sittings of the Senate outside Nairobi. Actually, should be in the third Senate. We initiated the inaugural sittings of the Senate outside Nairobi, commonly dubbed Senate Mashinani. These sittings showcased and entrenched the place of the Senate as an institution mandated to represent and protect the interests of counties and their governments, as highlighted in Article 96 of the Constitution. So far, Uasin Gishu and Kitui have hosted and will continue with this practice, and we shall continue as a Senate with this practice into the future. You are aware, Mr. Speaker, that I think 2 weeks ago, I did move a motion in this House, and colleague senators were gracious enough to agree with me that we carry on with this program, and there is already set in place a technical committee that is scouting for the ideal venue of the third edition of the Senate Mashinani. Mr. Speaker, we look forward to that edition later on this year. As you may recall, Article 96, Mr. Speaker, 6 of the Constitution of Kenya provides the Senate determines the allocation of national revenue among counties. Article 176 of the Constitution establishes the county governments which are mandated to perform the functions stipulated under Part 2 of the 4th Schedule to the Constitution. Under the principles of devolved government, the county government shall have reliable sources of revenue to enable them to govern and deliver services effectively. One of the major achievements of the Third Senate was a fight for increased resources for counties. Consequently, we have observed a consistent increase in shareable revenue from Kenya shillings 190 billion in 2013-2014 financial year to the current Kenya shillings 370 billion for financial year 2022-2023, representing a consistent annual average growth of 35%. Mr. Speaker, that was an important fight that we fought together as a House. The infamous, or the rather famous in the Senate, revenue formula debacle that lasted a good 10 weeks, Mr. Speaker. With all the intrigues and all the challenges that came with it, senators stood firm in this House. And thanks to Senate fighting together as a House, we had a steep jump in resources allocated to counties. In fact, the previous year, 2020-2021 financial year had been 316 billion. But thanks to that fight, we were able to grow it to 370 billion in the subsequent financial year, courtesy of the good work that senators did. Another hallmark of the Third Senate was the consideration and the passage of the third basis for revenue allocation among county governments. Through robust debates, the Senate emerged stronger than ever before and demonstrated its commitment. Mr. Speaker, these 10 years have not been without its challenges, but the Senate rose to the task and committed to upholding the principles of democracy, transparency, and accountability. This milestone marks a decade of dedicated service to the people of Kenya, as the Senate has played a vital role in shaping the country's legislative and governance agenda. Through its oversight role, the Senate has ensured that the public resources are used for the better of Kenyans and has held public officials accountable for their actions. As we commemorate this milestone, Mr. Speaker, we recognize the hard work and the dedication of the current and former senators who have worked tirelessly to ensure that the Senate remains a strong and effective institution. We acknowledge the support of the Kenyan people who have placed their trust in the Senate to represent their interests. Mr. Speaker, just reflecting upon, I thought as well on some of what many might consider to be among the highs, just as I've listed quite a number, and what perhaps where there is a high, Mr. Speaker, there has to be a low. the world and life generally is sinusoidal. It rises and it falls. And I remember quite a number. The passage of the security laws, Mr. Speaker, Amendment Bill of 2014, quite a difficult and a challenging time for us in Parliament. The passage of the revenue generation sharing formulas, the three of them, Mr. Speaker, have been quite a challenge in this House, Mr. Speaker. I have been lucky to witness all three, Mr. Speaker, and I know while each has been unique and has had its own difficulties and nuances associated with dividing anything money-related, Mr. Speaker, each has been unique, but I'm glad that on all three occasions, Senate emerged the winner. Of course, the first and the second Senate Mashinani sittings in Kitui goes down as a high. Mr. Speaker, the suspension of the Senate sittings in solidarity with senators arrested over the second generation revenue sharing formula. That was quite a high. We came together and pulled together close ranks across political party divides, Mr. Speaker, and ensure that our colleagues who had been arrested in the course of their duty were brought back to this House before debate could commence on anything, Mr. Speaker. That was quite a high. It's not every day, Mr. Speaker, that colleagues close ranks and fight for each other. Oversight of the county, oversight of county governments and assemblies by Senate committees, quite an important exercise that we partake through our various committees, Mr. Speaker. Well-coordinated impeachment processes bringing order to county governments, Mr. Speaker. We have saved governors on these floors. We've hanged some, Mr. Speaker. Both very difficult experiences. On days where we have acquitted some, hasn't been easy. Gone most of the times, Mr. Speaker, we've had to sit until very late at night. There are some that we've sat up to almost 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning because of statutory deadlines, Mr. Speaker. But all in all, we guided the specific county assemblies in the right way, complete with a exit report from the committee or the plenary, Mr. Speaker, guiding them on what to do and handle a particular situation. What are some of our laws, Mr. Speaker, as a House, the past 10 years as I reflect and think through? Quickly off my mind, Mr. Speaker, I remember the stalemate with the National Assembly and the national government over the division of revenue bill. Quite famous in the 10th Parliament, Mr. Speaker. No, the 11th Parliament, where National Assembly was grappling with appreciating that Senate had arrived, we were the new kid on the block, and we were ready and willing to defend the place of devolution in our Constitution. And therefore, on many afternoons, the National Assembly spent useful public time discussing individual senators as opposed to our position and what we stood for in the family of devolution, Mr. Speaker. It hasn't been an easy time. Secondly, of course, arrest of senators, colleagues, Senator Cleophas Malala, Senator Christopher Langat, and Senator Dr. Lutumbesi Lelegwe over standoff on related to the passage of second generation formula. That was quite a difficult time for us as a House, but I appreciate what we did together, all of us, those that were in support of the formula as proposed, those that were against, we all stood firm and said the state had taken their game too far. And until we were given a credible explanation of where our colleagues were, they were unconditionally released, that's when debate resumed, Mr. Speaker. Of course, Council of Governors and Senate standoff over oversight funds, especially conditional grants, and the High Court judgment limiting oversight mandate of the Senate. That was quite a low, Mr. Speaker. I must speak of it. And on that afternoon, when we retreated back to reflect on the judgment of the High Court, where the judge, in his finding, tried to limit the role of the Senate in oversighting funds to the specific counties, which funds we could go through, that was a difficult moment. Because on one hand, Mr. Speaker, you have the public charging at you and demanding of you that you're the senator for Siaya, senator for Nyamira, senator for Nyandarua. What are you doing as Governor XYZ is misappropriating public funds? The courts on the other side are telling us that you cannot do that on certain specific things that ordinary citizens don't understand. All they want is to see public money spent prudently. That was quite a low time for us. Of course, delay in constituting of committees and changes in leadership position for majority and minority side we've had this fight, this particular session on the minority side. For a greater part of last term, we had this particular challenge on the majority side. Mr. Speaker, not a very easy time when people have got to let go of leadership position, Mr. Speaker. Hasn't been an extremely easy time. And perhaps over time, this is a question that Senate needs to resolve, because much as it is difficult here in the Senate, more difficult in the county assemblies. And they draw from the experience in the Senate. I know for a fact that there are county assemblies, Mr. Speaker, that up to now, session, just trying to resolve who is a majority leader. And therefore, it's a challenge to us as a House, because we are the protectors and the custodians of devolution. Thinking about this, Mr. Speaker, perhaps either by legislation or provide a clear guidance on how to achieve on the positions of leadership here in the Senate as well as in our county assembly. Of course, failure by governors in the 11th Parliament to honor summons, quite a number, many have been fined. Unfortunately, in the Powers and Privilege Act, we haven't provided for how to, and we don't have the mechanism. You know, Parliament and Senate doesn't have, we cannot send our sergeant at arms to go and arrest governors who have refused to show up or have jumped bail, haven't paid their fines. We need to think through and consider that. Of course, removal of senators from office was quite a difficult time for us as well. I remember the case of Senator Mwaura, Senator Professor Kindiki, Wetangula, and Senator Kangata. That was quite a difficult time for us. Of course, delays of processing of Senate bills during the 11th and 12th Parliament. We haven't faced this challenge yet. I have to be optimistically cautious, Mr. Speaker, so that I don't get ahead of myself, because I know how, I've been around fairly long enough to know that when it's all rosy when you're beginning terms of Parliament. But as you get deep into the term, and there are disagreements between both houses, then the urge to withdraw or to ignore the Senate, rather, Mr. Speaker, clicks in. And on those occasions, you find that Senate ends up suffering. Mr. Speaker, finally, just as a way of concluding, and this I have picked randomly, I am just reflecting on colleague senators that we've had the privilege of serving with over the last 10 years, and moments and things that they did that will remain forever etched in the memory or the history of Senate, Mr. Speaker, for those acts have defined us, who we are today and what we shall be in the future. Number one, Mr. Speaker, Senate Speaker Ekwe Ethuro. I know for a fact, and I speak like this, Mr. Speaker, because I belong to his side of the political divide, then and even up to now, that part of the reason why he lost his job as Speaker of the Senate, and I don't think this is something that you need to be hearing, Mr. Speaker, is that on many occasions in the 11th Parliament, he was called to defend the position of the Senate against what you would call, quote unquote, the appointing authority. Some of them extremely powerful, Mr. Speaker. But because he stood firm in defense of this House, unfortunately, he never made it as he would have wished to return as a Speaker of this House. And I know that that's a huge price that he paid, but we continue to celebrate him. I celebrate him each day. He's one of the gentlemen who, when for one reason or the other I bump into him, I bow in honor because of what he did for this institution. During very difficult times, Mr. Speaker, including days when police officers were sent to cordon the House of Parliament. He stopped debate for close to 30 minutes until police officers moved away from Parliament. And of course, you know who had sent police officers then. It's not an easy decision. That seat that you sit on, Mr. Speaker, sometimes calls on you to make very, very difficult decisions in defense of this House, Mr. Speaker. And for that reason, I celebrate Senator Ekwe Ethuro. Secondly, the Senator Professor Kindiki served as our first majority leader on this side of the House where I lead, had the privilege of serving under him as a new senator, guided many of us that were new to Parliament then, even though even him was his first time of Parliament, had quickly learned the ropes and guided us, afforded us the opportunity to lay a firm foundation, and I believe that is what has guided many of us to secure and set up a firm foundation. Of course, he led in the institutionalizing of bipartisan approach on matters concerning the role and the place of Senate on devolution. That is something which, unfortunately, this House still continues to grapple with. And over time, I hope, as leader of majority, together with my counterpart, the leader of minority, we shall indoctrinate the current crop of colleague senators to appreciate that while we may disagree on the politics of the day, when it comes to matters defense of devolution and the institution of Senate, we fight together like brothers and sisters. We stand our ground together and we ensure that we stand and achieve that. That is one of the leading edicts and the teachings of Professor Kidiki on this House when he spoke many afternoons to speak. Of course, the Right Honorable Speaker of the National Assembly, Speaker Moses Masika Wetangula, then as leader of minority. Very interesting debates on many afternoons, Mr. Speaker. And I wish I said this when many of our colleague senators were here in the afternoon, because I continue to see in this House an unfortunate emerging trend, Mr. Speaker, where debate is losing its pace. I enjoyed those afternoons as a newcomer into this House, Mr. Speaker, where even though people are saying extremely difficult and sometimes harsh things to each other, those that were being spoken to kept quiet and allowed colleagues to make their point first before rising to counter whatever is being argued. That's a culture of debate. That's what Parliament is about, Mr. Speaker. And that's a culture which Senator Moses Masika Wetangula deeply espouses. Many afternoons kept this House entertained with his quotes from various books. Senator James Orengo, second leader of minority, Mr. Speaker, and now Governor for Siaya, stood steadfast in his defense of the Senate, together with other senior counsels from this House, defended the Senate when we went to the High Court, Court of Appeal. Unfortunately, perhaps because of his many engagements now in Siaya County, Mr. Speaker, hasn't been able to do that at the Supreme Court, Mr. Speaker. But, of course, he's being ably helped by our colleague, the Senator for Nyamira, Senior Counsel, Senator Omogeni. We celebrate his work. Senator Kiraitu Murungi led in the quest for strengthening of oversight role of the Senate in its and the place of Senate in the Parliamentary Service Commission. And I wish I said this when our colleagues in PSC were there, because when it became untenable and we felt that we were being shortchanged by our colleagues in the National Assembly, Senator Kiraitu Murungi one afternoon moved a motion in this House, Mr. Speaker, to have PSC split between two, to have a PSC for the National Assembly, one for the Senate. When that agitation began, at least, though for nuisance value and very little legal value of it, Mr. Speaker, because it will never have passed in the Assembly, at least got that third, or I think it was a fourth commission of PSC, Senator Omogeni, to take Senate seriously. And after that, there was a change in attitude in how PSC treated Senate as an institution. Of course, that danger always lacks, and you must remain vigilant. Senator Fatuma Dulo, led in the quest for strengthening of oversight role of a Senate, continues to celebrate her serving her second term as a woman senator. Not many women have been elected to represent counties in this House. She leads a distinguishing role, Mr. Speaker, having been elected twice to this House, of course, previously having then served as a nominated senator. I challenge to colleague senators who are nominated to know that you can start and build a stellar career from your nomination. That's what Senator Fatuma Dulo has done. Senator Kipchumba Murkomen served as Deputy Majority Leader, then later on as Majority Leader, stood steadfast in defense of Senate and devolution. I recall part of the very first committees that I enjoyed their sittings as a new member of this House was Devolution Committee, Mr. Speaker. And I wish, I don't know if Senator Abbas is in the House, Mr. Speaker, that the present Devolution Committee takes time to study the work that was done by the Devolution Committee of the Second Senate. Remember, that was a time that we were just turning the curve, Mr. Speaker, and getting into the cycle of devolution as a country. Therefore, there were many laws that needed to be passed, many challenges in the county governments. I recall the amount of work that they did. Traveled actually most of the afternoon. They missed plenary sittings, resolving disputes between governors and their deputies, county assemblies, and so on and so forth, Mr. Speaker. I wish that be the guiding spirit of the present Devolution Committee, chaired by the very able Senator Abbas. Senator Bill Okero, my first chairperson of the Budget and Finance Committee, a committee whose job and duty I took with utmost zeal and enjoyed serving, perhaps my best committee, the committee that I enjoyed serving in the most and gave me an understanding of the place of the institution of Senate, was under the chairmanship of Senator Bill Okero, Mr. Speaker. Served that committee, ensured that our reports, especially on BPS, Mr. Speaker, though ignored by the Treasury, will always find a way of either speaking and closing ranks with our colleagues from the National Assembly, despite the fact that those times there existed very frustrated relationships between both houses, Mr. Speaker, but also generally guided us in pushing for the place of devolution. When we began about conditional grants, Mr. Speaker, and so many amendments to the PFM guided by Senator Bill Okero. Senator Dr. Boni Halwale, our whip, Mr. Speaker, chaired the first committee of the County Public Accounts and Investment Committee and led the committee in establishing institutionalization of oversight on county governments as contemplated in Article 96. This was the first PAC committee that dealt with county governments. Remember, CPAC before was dealing only, when we were unicameral, Mr. Speaker, was dealing only with our colleagues, with oversighting the national government. But Senator Boni Halwale led this committee with great honor and distinction. I remember the many reports that he tabled before this House. And on that, courtesy of the work that his committee did, many county governments reformed and actually ensured that there was prudent use of public resources, a culture that is quickly waning away, Mr. Speaker, and is not something to be celebrated. I wish to challenge our colleague senators to take keen advantage of the reports, first of all, of CPIC, but second and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, even the audit reports. I see many occasions when I first came to this House, Mr. Speaker, when reports of Auditor General were tabled here by then Majority Leader, you'd see senators camper for the same, to pick a copy and see how their counties are doing. Nowadays, they lie idle, almost falling over on the clerk's table until they are carted away, Mr. Speaker, by the sergeant at arms. I think that's an area that, as a House, we need to improve and pay keen attention. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I've spoken about this, and it's something that I continue to engage my colleagues on the minority side about the need to perhaps rethink the place of oversight, to not only be reactionary to the audit reports brought by Auditor General, but even on issues that individual senators know about their counties. I am sure there can be a better process, and I proposed, and something that we haven't unfortunately been able to resolve, on that very sacred role of this institution, Mr. Speaker, can better be carried out as a complementary mechanism to what the Auditor General does, Mr. Speaker, because unfortunately, much as we think the Auditor General knows everything about your county, I don't think the Auditor General, despite the fact that they may have all the reports, Mr. Speaker, would know more about Busia County and the challenges that ails them more than their senator who's here, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, that's something that we need to perhaps make a decision about and move on motion. I promise the House, Mr. Speaker, that by the time we return after this short recess, we will have reached a common position with the leader of minority and propose something to the House. Senator Professor Peter Nyang'nyong'o, then Senator for Kisumu, chaired the Committee on County Public Accounts and Investment, led the committee in establishing county oversight mechanisms, also took a lead in strengthening oversight function by ensuring cabinet secretaries and other state public officers appeared before committees when summoned to. One of the best reports that you'll read about Parliament, Mr. Speaker, on Kenya Airways was courtesy of work that was done by a special committee led by Senator Professor Peter Nyang'nyong'o of this House, with this House, Mr. Speaker. Senator Martha Wangare, now member of Parliament for Gilgil, began her career in this House as a nominated senator, has moved on to serve now, I think now, she's serving her second term as member of Parliament for Gilgil constituency. Introduced and navigated amendment to the Employment Act, providing for the provision of pre-adoptive leave for parents seeking to adopt a child. You know, the bill was assented to and is now part of our employment law. Just the same way when you are expecting the birth of a child, Mr. Speaker, many people take leave. She introduced a very interesting proposal which senators and the National Assembly agreed to on what she called pre-adoptive leave. People going on leave as they prepare to adopt a child, Mr. Speaker. Senator Mutula Kilonzo Jr. Remains steadfast in his quest for the protection of devolution, introduced legislation on the county boundaries to resolve long outstanding and delicate boundary disputes between various counties. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the county boundaries bill has never been concluded on, Mr. Speaker. It's presently before the House. And I hope, Mr. Speaker, that this Senate will take time to have a rigorous debate about that particular bill this time, Mr. Speaker, especially in light of the fact that we know that IBC, once properly constituted, Mr. Speaker, has got to do delineation of boundaries in this present year. And I believe it is Senate that can guide on dispute resolution between various counties, Mr. Speaker. And this is a present challenge that exists. In fact, I struggle to imagine a county. There are very few counties that don't have boundary disputes with their neighboring counties, Mr. Speaker. And it's something that Senate can guide on how to conclude on this process. Senator Dr. Agnes Zani, Mr. Speaker, was instrumental in introducing legislation for the protection and enhancement of devolution, including the very famous Natural Resources Bill, which has been introduced this term of Parliament, I think, by Senator Danson Mungatana. I hope, Senator Mungatana, you work and conclude on that bill as soon as now, because that bill is extremely important to all of us, because each county has a resource that they share or that they give to the country. Yet, on many occasions, counties don't benefit. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, is just to remember that across this journey, we have lost many of our colleagues, and would wish just to mention them because those were extremely sad times for us as a Senate when we've had the unfortunate incident of having to lose colleagues. Of course, first was Senator Mutula Kilonzo, Senator Kajwang Senator Kajwang Gerald Otieno, Senator Kariuki Gigi of Laikipia in the 11th Parliament. Then, of course, in the 12th Parliament, last Senate, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, we lost Senator Ben Okello of Migori County. I believe after that loss, Senator Eddie tried to replace him, but was unsuccessful in that quest. Thank God he succeeded this time. Senator Yusuf Haji of Garissa, replaced by his son, Senator Abdul. Senator Kabaka Boniface served as senator for Machakos. Senator Prengei Victor, and Senator Machage Wilfred of Migori, Mr. Speaker, colleagues that we lost across the way. Mr. Speaker, I will be remiss if I conclude on that speech without celebrating. I have celebrated almost every other senator that has made contribution. Of course, I couldn't mention many who are still serving in this House, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the right time to celebrate them will come. But I want to celebrate equally, Mr. Speaker, the staff of the Senate, led by the very able clerk, Jeremiah Makoha Nyegenye, for 3 terms now, has served as clerk of the Senate, leading the first team, the first staff that put together the institution of Senate. Of course, you know for a fact, colleague senators, that their work is to make us look good. Many of the citations that we make here, the presentations that we make outside there, are presented by the very competent staff of the Senate. I know that for a fact. I have served as staff welfare, Mr. Speaker, chair, for 5 good years. And I know that you will struggle out there to find staff as competent as staffers of Parliament, especially those of the Senate, Mr. Speaker. No offense to staffers that serve in the National Assembly. I would never have said that last time, but now I have the luxury of saying the truth that staff of the Senate are extremely competent, Mr. Speaker, and they understand and know their duties and role, and on many occasions prepare Senate. Therefore, I celebrate the work that has been done also by Jeremiah as he leads the team together with his 2 very able deputies as well, Mohammed and Eunice. They have led Senate the last 10 years quite remarkably, Mr. Speaker. Of course, with a lot of difficulty. you know, when you have battles with the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, because it's not easy to target senators, because whatever my colleague or counterpart in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, says to me, I can answer back because I'm elected like him. But shudder to imagine what staffers of parliament, especially those of the Senate, go through when they are cited in the National Assembly in reports and mentioned on the floor sometimes because of inter-house battles. I don't think that that has been easy for staffers of the Senate, because on many occasions they have been on the receiving end wrongfully most of the time, if not all the time, from our colleagues in the National Assembly and the leadership therein, because of the stand that the Senate has taken. It's easy to find bogeymen in the leadership of the Senate staff, mostly in the place of Jeremiah. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I celebrate and do urge colleagues that we focus on to the next 10. I know we have started with difficulties, Mr. Speaker, but I give my assurance first to the Senate and to the country that we will find our bearing, we will find our space, we will close ranks, and this Senate, the current session, Mr. Speaker, I still believe will serve to be the best Senate that has been, other than the other two, better than even the other two, Mr. Speaker, because I know for a fact with great difficulty, as I say, there's always a silver lining in every cloud. I know, of course, at the moment, with all the difficulties that we are facing in the country, and even with us as an institution, people may begin to imagine or think that perhaps not much will be achieved. But I want to tell them, watch this space. This Senate will achieve great things for both for country and for the various counties, Mr. Speaker. With those very many remarks, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for indulging me. I celebrate you also, Mr. Speaker, for the work that you have done in the last few months. It hasn't been easy, but I know there will be a time to celebrate you even greater once you have steered us to greater success. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues, for indulging me.
Senator Ngatana, I will allow a few of us to make certain interventions, and we'll speak for not more than 5 minutes so that we have time for the business in the order paper. The Honorable Senator Ngatana.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to also make my comments as we celebrate 10 years of existence as a Senate. Mr. Speaker, I want to say I listened very carefully to what my majority leader was speaking, and I thank him because he gave us a very good summary of what we have been able to achieve as a Senate and the difficulties and the triumphs that we have seen in the last 10 years. Madam Speaker, the problems that this Senate has endured have something to do with the history in the formation. Madam Speaker, I was one of the members of that select committee that went to Naivasha. And it is good to recall, Madam Speaker, that the main target, the main thrust of our negotiations in Naivasha for the Constitution of 2010 was for the decision of whether we are going to go presidential or we are going to go parliamentary system of government. Madam Speaker, a lot of the other things were not really in focus. And I remember working around many hours, Madam Speaker, trying to find a compromise, meeting so many people, back, left, and right. And Madam Speaker, when the deal was stuck that we were going to go presidential system of government, a lot of things, including the section that dealt with Parliament, were not given the real attention they deserved. Madam Speaker, I remember very well that we then, as members of Parliament, did not want to cede power. We did not want to cede power to a new house called Senate. So what was the solution? The solution was to propose a house that will be sitting just for 4 times in a year. The solution was to create a house similar to the one in the Kingdom of Eswatini, where, Mr. Speaker, members of Parliament are elected and then from their various regions, they sit down to elect members of the Senate. In other words, it's a secondary vote. Then, Madam Speaker, we wanted to create a Senate similar to what existed then in Canada, where members of parliament are the people who sit down and they do a secondary vote after the universal suffrage. And then, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, then the senators would come in. And what we had in mind, Madam Speaker, was to maintain all power within the National Assembly. And we were very clear at that time that we needed to just honor some legislators who had served term and who were willing to serve in the Senate. So, Madam Speaker, time has now come that because the committee of experts decided that they were going to give the senators universal suffrage, they were to come back by direct vote. Madam Speaker, then they did not give them the correct powers. Madam Speaker, then we have historical issues in terms of execution of our mandate. So, Madam Speaker, my prayer is that going forward, this House, Madam Speaker, would be a House that makes laws and have a second bite at the cherry. Today, Madam Speaker, during the statement hour, we were told of a law that was passed specifically at the National Assembly just to benefit those who wanted to make maximum profits from cashew nuts, Bixa, macadamia business. Madam Speaker, if that law had come to a second chamber, to a senior chamber such as ours, it would not have passed and the people would have been saved. And Senator Morango from Kirinyaga would not have had to cry because of the way the farmers from his areas are being mistreated because of that law that was passed in a haste at the lower house. Madam Speaker, it would help us to think about making approval sittings to just be the Senate preview so that, Madam Speaker, only senators, like in the United States where we borrowed this system, should be sitting to approve potential nominees from.
Time up, Senator Mungatana. Thank you. Senator Catherine Muma.
Thank you, Madam Senator, for this opportunity to contribute to this. I would like to celebrate, is it the second birthday or the second birthday of the Senate under the new constitution. Madam Speaker, I happen to serve on the Commission for the Implementation of the Constitution, and I would like to endorse what Majority Leader has said, that those who were before us, the first Senate and the second Senate, or the second Senate after independence and the third Senate, did a great job. They did a great job in modeling to the country what the rule of law looks like. Madam Speaker, I would like to single out names and recognize Senators James Orengo, Senators Anyang' Nyong'o, Senators Otieno Kajwang, Senator Bilokero, Senator Boni Halwade, Senator Moses Wetangula, Senator Professor Kithure Kindiki, Mutula Kilonzo, and then later, Senator Mutai Kagwe, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. Later we had the Super Senator Sakaja, we had Mutula Kilonzo Jr., and as we move on for the lady senators, I also wish to celebrate our leading senator, Senator Dulo, who has been here 3 times. Madam Speaker, also celebrating our first elected senators, Senator Dulo, Senator Professor Margaret Kamar, Senator Susan Kihika, Senator Kavindu Muthama, and in this particular sitting, Fatuma Dulo, Senator Mudama, and Senator Tabitha Keroshe. Madam Speaker, the first Senate in particular fought for devolution. The truth is that the government of the day then was hell-bent on clawing back on devolution. And the senators in this house stood firm across the aisle and fought for devolution. Madam Speaker, I am hoping that the Senate in which I am currently serving will not be the Senate that will be on record as the Senate that will claw back on the rule of law, will not be the one that is going to claw back on devolution. Madam Speaker, I hope we can move further and recognize that we have a lot of work to do, and we can, for instance, strengthen intergovernmental relations, including intergovernmental relations between the Senate and the county assemblies, that we can also be the Senate that will get the collective responsibility of all arms of government to review the over 150 laws, Madam Speaker, that pre-existed the Constitution of Kenya 2010, that are on county functions or devolved functions, but have not been aligned to these functions. Madam Speaker, as we continue taking into account the current political situations, I will urge all senators across the aisle to do what we swore to be done, to actually be the senators that will help to move devolution a notch higher, the one that will truly help this country to enjoy what the Constitution of Kenya 2010 envisages under the Constitution. Madam Speaker, one last bit, I want to request that in considering intergovernmental relations, we will also be the House that will recognize the intergovernmental bodies that have worked, including bodies like the CAF, the Council of Governors, and the regional blocks that have been helpful in implementing devolution. I support, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Catherine. We'll have Senator Cheptumo William to take it up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me to thank the Majority Leader for that very comprehensive update to the House regarding the achievements and the challenges that have been faced this House in the 10 years. Madam Speaker, I served in the National Assembly for 15 years. And in the last 10 years, that is a time when this House, under the new Constitution, was established. And Madam Speaker, that time we used to understand this House differently. I used to understand differently. In a sense that even when, and I think I've said this before, when there was need to facilitate and to avail funds to this House for senators to be able to perform their functions, I was one of those members in the National Assembly, Madam Speaker, which really opposed. And I remember when the regulations came before the House, I was the chairman of the Delegated Legislation Committee at that time. And we never saw the need, and I never saw the need as the chair of that committee at that time. Madam Speaker, having been now in this House, it has already been said by the Majority Leader that one of the challenges this House faced is the fact that it doesn't have resources, that senators were not being facilitated to be able to perform the functions. And I think, Madam Speaker, there will be a Kamukunchi after this sitting to discuss as a house on how best as a house we deal with that particular situation. Madam Speaker, unless and until this house is enabled to perform their functions. Madam Speaker, when I was a member of parliament, you will allow me to refer to this because I want to draw comparison between what happened in that situation and now. The amount available for a member of parliament to manage a constituency is the same amount available to a senator to manage for Nairobi 17 constituencies. In Baringo now, I manage 6 constituencies using the same resources I used to manage 1 constituency. That is a challenge, Madam Speaker, and I think even as we appreciate the challenges this House has gone through, the successes it has been able to achieve, that is an area we need to look into. Madam Speaker, 10 years have gone, and devolution, as envisaged initially, was so that, Madam Speaker, we take more resources down to the people. Madam Speaker, today we are at 385 billion, if I'm not wrong, in this coming budget, from what we know. I still believe, Madam Speaker, Baringo, for example, a county with challenges, 65% arid and semi-arid, Madam Speaker, receives only about 6.5 billion Kenya shillings. It is unable to achieve and to perform and deal with matters challenging facing our people. So, Madam Speaker, I think this House, as we listen and appreciate the successes Senate has done over the years, it is time for us now, Madam Speaker, as a House to stand firm, claim our space, and continue to use the existing current understanding between the 2 houses, Madam Speaker, because I believe that there is some element of understanding now, so that, Madam Speaker, we reduce the tension that has existed before between the 2 houses. Madam Speaker, I am happy today that I participate in this House. And as we move forward, Madam Speaker, Kenyans and Kenya, Madam Speaker, will be...
Time up. Senator Eric Mogenioko.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I also want to join my colleague senators and Senator Cheruiyot, Majority Leader, in celebrating the 10 years that the Senate has been in place. Madam Speaker, I will not repeat the salutations of senators who have left a mark in this House, and I think, Madam Speaker, the Majority Leader has done very well in giving a very good summary. But, Mr. Speaker, a challenge has been thrown our way this afternoon by the Majority Leader, that we must also leave a mark, Madam Speaker. Listening to the contributions this afternoon and the confessions, including what I've heard from Senator Mungatana, Mr. Speaker, it is evident, Mr. Speaker, that the people gathered in Naivasha had one agenda: to mutilate and weaken this House, Madam Speaker. And we must, Madam Speaker, as we celebrate our brothers who have moved from the other House, including Senator Jeptumo, Senator Halwale, Senator Mungatana here, Senator Onyonka, Senator Dr. Oburu, we must, Madam Speaker, wake up to the realization, Mr. Speaker, that this is not the House that Kenyans intended when they created a second chamber after Naivasha, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, what do we want to be remembered for, Mr. Speaker? Madam Speaker, our brothers who served in the first and second Senate made their contribution. Madam Speaker, my take is that a time has come, Madam Speaker, where this House must make a resolution, the way we made a resolution and moved to the High Court together in filing petition 284. We must pass a resolution, Madam Speaker, to revisit the power, the legislative power of the Senate, Madam Speaker. What was put in Article 96, Madam Speaker, was a deliberate effort to make us operate as a lower house, Madam Speaker. And the tragedy is, Madam Speaker, unlike the reference of that Senator Sesatini that Senator Mugatana has referred to, this Senate enjoys direct mandate from the people. Look at the votes that brought Senator Halwali here. Look at the votes that brought Senator Dr. Buru Odinga here. Look at the votes that brought my friend, Senator for Busia, and even myself, Senator for Nyamira, Madam Speaker. We cannot be sitting here every day rewriting the book of lamentations, Madam Speaker. A time has come, Madam Speaker, we must bite the bullet, Madam Speaker, and go to the annals of history as the Senate that put in place a bold move of getting back our correct legislative authority as an upper house, Madam Speaker. Listen to contributions by Senator Mugatana. We sit here, Madam Speaker, representing counties, Madam Speaker, yet we don't vet even cabinet secretaries. We don't vet the Attorney General of this Republic. We don't vet permanent secretaries, Madam Speaker. That should not continue, Madam Speaker. Let us pull together, Madam Speaker. This is for posterity. This is in public interest. This is for the good of our country, Kenya. This is in defense of devolution, Madam Speaker. So I'm urging my colleagues, as we celebrate 10 years, let us also leave a mark. Let us ask the question, what will we be celebrated for as the third Senate, Madam Speaker? We cannot, Madam Speaker, continue as if business as usual. No, things are not right, Madam Speaker. As we speak, Madam Speaker, your counterparts in National Assembly are controlling 60 million for repair of roads in each constituency. And you have no say as a senator. We tried to amend the Roads Act on the floor of this House, Madam Speaker. But our friends, our brothers from the National Assembly said they will never allow us to have any say on the usage of that money. Yet, Madam Speaker, as a senator, you need to know where has your governor put money for roads. You need to know where has the member of parliament put money for roads so that there is no duplication, Madam Speaker. We cannot allow, Madam Speaker, a situation where there is wastage of resources. Madam Speaker, a road is done by a governor today, a member of National Assembly will come the following day, Madam Speaker, and they do the same thing. Look at bursaries. You have a member of parliament dispersing bursaries. Women rep giving bursaries. Governor giving bursaries. Which household receives what? So, Madam Speaker, I pray, Madam Speaker, that this Senate will lead the way, Madam Speaker, in amending the Constitution so that we truly become an upper house. This is not about UDA. This is not about Azimio, Madam Speaker. This is about having a constitution.
Thank you, Senator Mugeni. Senator Boni Halwale, I cannot see Senator Wakili Sigei, so you can take the floor, Senator Boni.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it's indeed a privilege for me to stand here and thank God that when I cast my eyes across the House, I see only two people, who are there on day one of the second Senate, which is the first Senate in this generation. It was Mr. Speaker, who are currently in this House. It was Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the clerk, Nyekenya, and myself, Mr. Speaker. We are the only ones surviving from that generation. So we want to thank God. Having thanked God, I want to thank the leader of the majority and ask the clerk as the CEO of the Parliamentary Service Commission, did you really put thought into this process? Are we not the real problem? Why? How can you say this is a great day? When we have demeaned ourselves, we are reducing celebration of a national institution that changed the trajectory of development in this country, that brought tarmacs for the first time in the country, build level 4 and level 5 hospitals, teaching and referral hospitals for the first time in this country. We are celebrating it through a motion late in the evening. Today, life should have come to a standstill in the entire Senate so that we celebrate this day in a proper manner. We are demeaning ourselves. And I challenge the CEO, who is none other than the clerk. They have failed us. I challenge the Speaker. I challenge the leader of the majority. The resources are there. I know for a fact there is nobody in the current government who would not have supported a proper celebration of this Senate. Having said that, Madam Speaker, I want to tell members that this agitation of more funds and more funds and more funds to county governments, we should temper it. Temper it with questions of, when we send the money, what does it do? 10 years ago, Senator Uhuru, we gave devolved units 210 billion. And this year, we are going to give them 385. If you go in each and every one of those counties 10 years ago, the governors came out of their starting blocks like bullets. You'll find something innovative here, innovative there, but with the years, it has gone down. Now our county governments are employment bureaus, bureaus that employ friends and relatives of governors. Let us insist that the money going to county governments should be for development, and it should meet the mandatory 30% provision in the County Government Act. Madam Speaker, I don't want to speak for long. I'm so proud of you, and I know for sure that this little resistance that you are hearing from here and there will end with time, because in these 10 years, senators have become MCS, MCS have become senators, women MPs have become governors, governors have become senators, people like Khalwale who resigned my seat as senator have since come back to the Senate. So the will is evolving, and I know that the common sense of the entire country will one day in our lifetime realize that you need to give Senate its position. I conclude by speaking to the issue of devolution in Belgium. In Belgium, the devolved governments are more resourced than the national government, the federal government in Belgium. In fact, if you go to Wayne, the Wayne state gives financial support to the federal government. This is where I want us to take Nairobi, so that people should not take Nairobi. Thank you, Madam Speaker, I support.
Thank you. Senator Oburu Odinga.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity. Madam Speaker, this is a great day for the Senate, and the majority leader has left. I would have really liked to congratulate the majority leader, Madam Speaker, because he is very eloquent. He's a young man, but I think he will go far, because he narrates exactly what happened, and in a very, very eloquent and easy way. Madam Speaker, devolution is something which was inherited from independence. Madam Speaker, at independence we had two parties. There was KADU and there was KANU. And KADU was advocating for what was then called Majimbo. But Majimbo, in its application, was actually devolution. Madam Speaker, at independence, we had a Majimbo constitution. And that Majimbo constitution gave us regional assemblies. Madam Speaker, that constitution gave us regional governments. And at that time, Madam Speaker, there was a passion for unity. Unity, 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 uhuru na umoja, uhuru na umoja, uhuru na umoja. Madam Speaker, over the years, it was proved that that uhuru na umoja was not devolving resources to the grassroots. Madam Speaker, it became a very skewed way of allocating resources to the mashinani. That is why, Madam Speaker, in Parliament, when Engineer Karwe introduced a bill to create a CDF, CDF became the only thing that MPs were doing in their constituency. CDF became so popular that most members of parliament were judged by how they used CDF. And this was a very small amount of money. And that is why, Madam Speaker, when delegates from all over the country converged at Bomas of Kenya, they came out with proposals to have a new constitution, and that new constitution was creating counties, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, those counties were big counties, counties which were, there were only 14 counties. Madam Speaker, when people went to Naivasha, those who went to Naivasha mutilated the proposals from Bomas of Kenya and created 47 counties, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think unless and until we create counties which are economically viable, which are big enough, like many, yes, we shall not have the counties being very effective. I've heard Honorable Kalwale saying that counties are more or less like employment bureaus. They are employing their relatives. That is true, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, counties should be units which deliver services to the people. And the employment, of course, should be one of them. But the main target of devolved units should be service to the people and creating development to the people. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I think that this Senate has a long way to go. And we need to put the Senate back where it was in the Bomas draft constitution. Let us make the Senate an upper house. Madam Speaker, your office is a very powerful office. And that office, your office, which it really defends the devolution the way Honorable Cheriot was explaining here, Senator Cheriot. I think your office can make a big difference. Just make it a target that you want to make sure that there are changes made so that the Senate takes its place, which the National Assembly cannot do. The place of an upper house, the place for moderation of bills, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we should be able to do away with majoritarian dictatorship. Senate represents.
Unfortunately, Senator, thank you. I think time is up for you. Yes, Senator Essie Kinyori.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First, I want to support the statement by Senator Aaron Cheriot. Even as we commemorate 10 years since inception of the Senate, noting that we had it but initially abolished in 1966. So today, in a special way, I also want to recognize Senator Boni Alwale, proverbially the one-legged dancer, who welcomed me even before I was sworn into this Senate because of his soft spot for young people who are pursuing ambition in leadership. Secondly, I also want to say we've made quite a milestone. Today, Madam Speaker, you're seated there as a testimony for supporting women, you and Senator Catherine Muma. So that's a positive thing as we celebrate the Senate today. I also share a lot of similarities with the Honorable Member Martha Wangari, who in her youthful days was a student leader in Sonu, then led Warembo na Kibaki. Just like I do, I was a student leader in Masai Mara University, serving as the first female vice president of the student union, then ran Women for Ruto, that was mobilizing young people in support of the election of President William Ruto in the past campaign. And I'm now a nominated senator. Why I'm giving this is that the Senate is a very good breeding ground for young people who are pursuing leadership and for women generally in this country. Madam Speaker, though I'm challenged and I think the constitution architecture in general needs to be reviewed. Currently, the Senate is serving more of a token other than its rightful place at the upper house in this country. Madam Speaker, reviewing will give back the Senate its space in this country so that we are able to clearly provide the oversight that the people have been yearning for and in entrenching devolution. I also look forward to this Senate giving guidelines on civic education. Madam Speaker, as you well know, Article 100 of the County Governments Act of 2012 well stated that the county government should be having civic education programs in their counties. But several years down the line, none of the counties have complied because their claim is we do not have a national framework on civic education. I hope this fourth Senate will bring that to actualization so that we do not have what we are currently seeing where a governor will issue roadside declarations of bursaries being issued to needy children, whereby citizens in the first place do not even have information on what to expect from their leadership. Civic education not only in county government, but institutions in those counties, so that we are bringing up an informed citizenry. Madam Speaker, as I also wind up, I look forward to this Senate clearly stating to what extent did we have the 14 functions that were taken down to the counties implemented. Currently, we have so many wrangles, which this Senate would have actually addressed, because you know when devolution came in, the Constitution was already in place in 2010. So most of the challenges we are experiencing currently were not imagined then. So as I sit down, I'm a very proud member to be part of the fourth Senate, and I look forward to being part of the success of this House, and as a breeding ground for us, me as a young person and as a woman, to transit to elective politics so that we can serve Kenyans better and fulfill whatever mandates they have given to us. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We have some comments from Senator Okoiti Andrew Mtata. That should be the last one, because we are approaching 5:30.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to stand here on this important day when we celebrate 10 years since the restoration of the Senate chamber to the Parliament of the Republic of Kenya. The Senate chamber is a very, very important institution. One, it has got fewer members than the National Assembly, so it is easy to be deliberative because people know each other, and it's easy to agree and pass a motion. And I support what Senator Mugatana said, that this Senate should be the House approving
appointments. But we were basically, the House was basically emasculated in Naivasha. The Senate was also mixed up. If you look at senates around the world that have a presidential system, and in presidential systems, I'm talking of the US.
Senator Omutata, I do not like to stop you midway, but unfortunately there was an earlier direction from the Honorable Speaker that at 5:30 this House does adjourn. Honorable Senators, earlier on the Speaker directed that Senator Eddie Okech moves a motion of adjournment under Standing Order 37. I will now invite Senator Okech to proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move the motion that pursuant to Standing Order 37, the Senate do now adjourn to discuss a definite matter of national importance, namely the deteriorating security situation in the country. Madam Speaker, for the avoidance of any doubt, or to be able to help us in these deliberations, I wish first of all to start by defining what deterioration is with regards to this particular motion. Oxford Dictionary defines deterioration as progressively or rapidly becoming worse. And Madam Speaker, security in context is defined by the Oxford Dictionary as a state of being free from danger or any threat. If you look further in the same definition, it goes further and says that security is basically being able to offer protection to a country, a building, property, or a person from danger or threat. Madam Speaker, knowing that we are a country that is established under the Constitution of Kenya, Article 2 of the Constitution defines what this republic is, which basically makes us a country that has got some social contract that defines how we as a people must live. The framers of our Constitution therefore chose to dedicate an entire chapter, chapter 14, on what national security should be. In fact, Madam Speaker, if you read Article 238 of the Constitution, the principles of national security for which we all signed for when we endorsed this Constitution is clear that national security is the protection against internal and external threats to Kenya's territorial integrity and to sovereignty and its people, their rights, freedoms, property, peace, stability, prosperity, and other national interests. Madam Speaker, on 20th March of this year, we saw protesters in this country facing the danger and the threat of serious arrests that sometimes led to police killing some of the protesters. Though to be factual, on 20th, one man in Kisumu was killed, and this one has been documented by IPOA in carrying out their function under their own act, the IPOA Act, Section 6. And Madam Speaker, on 27th of March, we saw this indiscriminate, killing by the police continuing in this country, but more so, we saw serious attacks that seemingly were planned, and they were unceasing and very brutal to same people within the boundaries of Kenya called protesters. Madam Speaker, IPOA, on a letter written on 27th, a press conference that they did issue, indicated that in Migori County, there was a protester. There was a protester who was killed. And then number two, in Kisumu County, there was a protester who was killed. And IPOA also complained very seriously so on a number of incidences where we saw a serious indiscriminate arrest and illegal detention of some of these supporters of Azimio. Madam Speaker, worse enough is that we also saw serious thuggery and destruction of property in the Kenyatta's farm called Northland Farms, as well as the Odinga family business called the East African Spectre Limited, with people who are conducting these serious crimes, heinous crimes, against these two businesses in the country without the police taking action. Madam Speaker, under Article 244 and supplemented by the National Police Service Act, Section 24, the police have got a total responsibility to be able to protect property and to be able to protect life. What we saw happening to these two family businesses, which are individual businesses, Madam Speaker, was completely unacceptable. We saw young people going to a farm, cut trees, add time to even kill animals and carry some of the animals, and even add time to come back and burn down the same farm. All this happened within 6 hours that the police was watching, and I am, as a young person in this country, I am wondering if the state can sanction and even watch the destruction of property to somebody as high level as former president of state of Kenya without him being protected or without his property being protected. Then what happens to our Njiko in this country who does not enjoy such kind of privileges? What happens to a mere senator like my brother Matthew here or my sister Tabitha there if the property of somebody who has been the head of state cannot be protected? Madam Speaker, it is extremely sad that this coordinated and state-sponsored crime went further to the land of the poorest and the most downtrodden people of Kibera, to the extent that thugs sponsored by state, and I say sponsored because it is in the public domain, Madam Speaker, when the Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, together with Mr. Kimani Ichung'wah, who is the minority leader in the National Assembly, as well as Moses Kuria, who is a cabinet secretary, convened and made public pronouncements leading to these problems. Made public pronouncement to the extent I am moving a motion, you know the rules of the House, made public statements that...
What's your point of order?
Madam Speaker, I'm moving a motion. This is a problem because when you're moving a motion, I'm not supposed to be interrupted. People know the rule of this House. That's double standards, but it's okay.
Madam Speaker, because this can very well degenerate into a very emotive and emotional debate, I want to appeal to the mover of the motion to stick to the principle that if you must discuss the Deputy President or our colleague Kimani Ichung'wah, it should be through a substantive motion where you will support your argument with facts and figures. Madam Speaker, is it in order to allege that the above-mentioned people planned mayhem without bringing here a substantive motion?
Senator Eddy, I would like that you stick to the motion that you're bringing to the House without using names, because if you have to state names of certain individuals or personalities, it is then important that you substantiate. or bring the evidence that then links them to whatever you are alleging. Those are very serious allegations.
Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Madam Speaker, this House is also guided by traditions and custom. Last week, when Senator Cheruiyot was moving a motion, in fact, there was a decision, a directive by the Speaker, that when somebody is moving a motion, no points of order would be allowed. In fact, Madam Speaker, you asked me personally to hold whatever point of order I had until he had finished, and then I would raise it at the appropriate time, Madam Speaker. What these interruptions when somebody is moving the motion do is to derail somebody's thought process. I am sure that we mean to have a sober debate this afternoon. I just want to urge that as we have agreed and discussed in previous meetings, let the rules apply fairly. If it has already been established as a custom that when the majority leader is moving, no objections are allowed or no points of order are allowed, I think what is good for the goose must be good for the gander, Madam Chair. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sifuna. Senator Eddy, you take the floor, and as guided from the chair, you withdraw the names and proceed, and we will proceed as per the standing orders.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I do respect Senior Boni Alwale, Senator, but it will be naive if we do not say things that are even in journalistic conversations that we see. But that said, Madam Speaker, I wish to actually advise my brother Boni and anybody who takes these things without a bipartisan approach that on April 6th, 1994, kids in Rwanda were playing in the morning. Children were going to school in the morning, Boni. Men and women were going to their work as if it was normal. And on 7th April, the same month, the same year, the country woke up to a killing of 80,000 people in that country, Madam Speaker. That ended up that those 80,000, 800,000 within that month died in that country, Madam Speaker. When we talk about things that Boni Alwale himself has watched on TV, has watched on social media of leaders in a country like this making reckless statements that lead to this kind of gangs forming, that leads to people mobilizing on tribal basis, that lead to people mobilizing on religious basis, this country, we can lose it within a second. So I am here to bring a motion that is not about a political statement on my own political function, but I am here to bring a motion.
I have directed you for purposes of your moving the motion. Withdraw the names first, you'll have a chance to debate, and then move your motion and call the seconder.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I think for the respect of the time that you have given me, Madam Speaker, my thought process on the issue of attack of private property, I wanted to indicate that in Zimbabwe, when national leaders started this kind of castigation of mobs,
if you're interested in proceeding with the
motion, I have not
withdrawn.
I've not talked about any other name.
The names you mentioned earlier for purposes of the answer.
Madam Speaker, for the purposes of answered, I will not be able to withdraw those names because they are on public record and journalistic conversations that if needed for me to be able to bring in this House, I will be able to table them. And I want to be in record that if I'm needed to bring evidence and substantiate according to our own standing orders, Madam Speaker, this is something I'm willing to do because we are not in this House to lie to anybody in matters that are going to bring serious conflict in this country that can end up making us lose the country. So I want to be on record that if that is a requirement, then I will be able to bring those evidence to be able to substantiate substantiate the names that I've mentioned, Madam Speaker.
Eddy, I then direct you to table that evidence by tomorrow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Right. I will do that. And as I conclude,
when the House business resumes tomorrow, you will table that evidence.
I will table, Madam Speaker, those particular evidence that utterances that led to this kind of violence that we saw yesterday, Madam Speaker.
I'll give you 1 minute now. Your time is up.
Madam Speaker, I've been interrupted in the entire motion. I beg for 2 minutes.
Proceed on in.
Thank you,
Proceed
Madam
on.
Speaker. I wanted to indicate that in some countries, Madam Speaker, we have seen this kind of attack on private property and attack on businesses in the excuse that some nationalistic leaders were giving them back to freedom fighters. In Zimbabwe, Madam Speaker, we saw the government of Robert Mugabe trying to give back land to what they called freedom fighters, and this escalated to the issue of even taking property from established businesses and established farms of other nations to the extent that that country was brought down. So to the extent that as a house established to protect the people, and in the spirit of Article 14 of the Constitution, I want to urge this House that we must be able to put our police to task, and we must be able to discuss the incessant and continued misuse of police, as well as misdirection by leaders, that is leading to serious insecurity issues in this country. With that, Madam Speaker, I beg to move this motion and beg the Senator of Narok, Senator Ledamo Lekina, to second the motion. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator Ledamo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to second this motion on insecurity in the Republic of Kenya. Madam Speaker, in 1992, this country, because of tribal clashes, the Parliament then sought the need to be able to go around the country in a commission led by the Honorable former Member of Parliament called Kennedy Kiluku. In that report, which I'd like to invite all distinguished senators to go and read, there were details of what happened when we allow the rule of law to be misguided, when we allow insecurity of a country to be the order of the day. In 2007, there was a subsequent report by Justice Akiwumi during the post-election violence. Madam Speaker, I was perturbed yesterday when I saw the way the police service behaved when hooligans, who are orchestrated by a group of known politicians, were ferried all the way to Ruiru from different parts of this country to be able to go and attack private property. Madam Speaker, those acts of hooliganism are something that led the framers of the Constitution to be able to establish what they called a free, or rather an independent institution called the police service. But yesterday, Madam Speaker, knowing very well that that area has got 3 police stations, I was shocked to see that the police from Ruai, the police from Gatunguru, and the police from Ruiru were all asked not to attend or not to interfere with what those hooligans were doing. We have had our fellow members, honorable members of parliament, making utterances. And what shocked me, Madam Speaker, is that NCIC were quiet, they were numb until today. Madam Speaker, I want to plead to Kenyans, and I want to tell Kenyans to wake up, because we have fought so hard for our freedoms. We have fought so hard for what we have today, for us to allow selfish individuals to drive this country into the dogs. Madam Speaker, this country is treading in very dangerous zones. We are affecting international trade. Very soon, nobody would want to come and invest in this country. Madam Speaker, there's a famous phrase where they talked about that when they went for the communists, they did not speak because I was not a communist. They went further and they went to the Jewish. I did not speak because I was not a Jewish. And when they came for me, there was no one to speak for me. I want to remind Kenyans that what happened yesterday for the former president of this republic, no one is safe. The next person who will be attacked are investors. The British who are living in Laikipia will also be attacked because no one is safe with this kind of hooliganism. Madam Speaker, I want to condemn, and I want to remind the police that you're being used, yet you're paid peanuts. You're being used to be able to line other people's pockets, to be able to solve other people's issues, yet you are just left to wallow in poverty. You do not have good health insurance. You do not have a good place where you can be able to call a home. I want to call upon police in this country. Please, think twice. And the fact that yesterday it took 24 hours before the Inspector General of Police to be able to go in and see what was happening in Northland's land, lead me to conclude that there's no longer independence in this country. There is no institution which is independent, which is against the Constitution. In fact, I'm calling for the resignation of the Inspector General of Police because he has failed. And sometimes this is what leaders, Madam Speaker, even as legislators, and we know the consequences, to invite the military to be able to take on security in this country because the police service, first of all, it's no longer a service, it is a force, has failed in performing its task. We had the Inspector General of Police sending out warnings. If you really cared about Kenyans, why didn't you not go to rescue the former president's property when it was being attacked by hooligans?
Yes, wind up.
When it goes off, Madam Speaker, that's a tradition. As I wind up, Madam Speaker, and as I second this, I want to remind those who orchestrated or who perpetrated those acts of hooliganism that in law there is no escapatory. You cannot run away from what happened yesterday. And I can see ICC calling, because if Ledama can be called by NCIC because of simply making utterances.
Have you seconded the motion?
Before I could second, I second.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that the Senate do now adjourn to discuss a definite matter of urgent national importance, namely the state of insecurity in the country. And Honorable Senators, I propose that each senator, there are many senators who would want to contribute to this motion, each of the senators to take 3 minutes. We have about, this is 5:52, so we have 38 minutes. So if you want 5 minutes, then it means we'll have less senators speaking, so we can proceed with the 5 minutes. Senator William Kisang. Senator Bonnie Halole.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to use this opportunity to congratulate the Senator from Migori for this very important motion on a matter of gross national importance. Madam Speaker, may I send my condolences to family, friends of the children who lost their lives, and similarly extend my sympathy to business people whose businesses have been destroyed. I want to agree with the Senator that everybody must exercise restraint, Madam Speaker, so that...
What's your point of order? Pause this time.
Madam Speaker, I raise on standing order number 35, 34, 5. I wish to request that this House extend its hours of sitting until all senators wishing to contribute to the adjournment motions have contributed. I'd like to ask Senator Manzo to second.
I now propose the question that this House do allow adjournment after all the senators have contributed to this motion. As many as are of that opinions. I now put the question that this House be adjourned after all the senators who intend to contribute to this motion have done their contribution. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion say nay. Nay. The we will now call a division. Let's put a division. I have now called a division. I have given the direction, please. Clerk. Ring the bell for 2 minutes, clerk. And Sergeant at Arms, can you proceed to close the door? Allow him in. Allow him in. Tell us, can we have tell us?
Check if the speaker has a vote. Okay, fine. You mark quickly.
Are you ready? I now put the question that all senators who intend to contribute to this motion be allowed to contribute, and adjournment to take place after all the contributions are received.
Abbas Sheikh Ahmed, Abdulrahman Miraj Abdullahi, Adan Dulo Fatma, Asige Crystal Kagehi,
Oh, I vote yes.
Boy Isa Juma, Cherarkei Samson, Cheruyot Aaron Kipkirui,
No.
Chesang Alan Kiprotich, Chute Mohammed, Ekomwa James Lamenen, Haji Abdul Mohammed, Kajuang Moses Otieno, Kamar Margaret Jepkoech, Kamau Joseph Githuku, Kathuri Murungi, Keroche Tabitha Karanja, Kalwale Dr. Boni,
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Kibwana Hamida, Kipkiror William Cheptumo, Kisang William Kipkemoy. Sorry.
I vote no.
Kisang William Kipkemoy, Korir Joyce Chepkoech, Lelegwe Steve Tumbesi, Lemaletian Hezina, Maanzo Daniel Kitonga,
I vote yes.
Mazayo Stewart Machiru, Maina Veronica Waheti. She can vote. She has a vote.
I vote no.
Mandago Jackson Kiplagat, Mbogwa George Mungai, Matthew John Muhia, Mogeni,
I vote yes.
Senator Mohammed Shakila Abdallah, Senator Montet Betty Batuli, Senator Muma Catherine Muyeka.
I vote yes.
Senator Muma Catherine Muyeka.
I vote yes.
Senator Mundigi Alexander Munyi. Senator Mungatana Johnson Buya. Senator Murango James.
I vote no.
Senator Murango James Kamau.
No.
Senator Mudhama Agnes Kavindu. Senator Mutinda Maureen Tabitha.
I vote no.
Senator Mwaruma Jones Mwashusha. Senator Mwenda Gataya Mofaya. Senator Mwinyi Haji Mohamed Faki. Senator Mwizagu Raphael Chimera. Senator Nderitu John Kinyua. Senator Ngugi Joe Joseph Nyotu. Senator Nyamu Karen Njeri. Senator Oginga Oburu. Senator Ogola Beatrice Akinyi. Senator Ojenda Odhiambo Tom. Senator Okenyuri Esther Anyeni.
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Senator Okech Eddie Gisheru.
I vote a big yes.
Senator Okoiti Andrew Omtata.
I vote yes.
Senator Olekina Ledama.
I vote yes.
Senator Omar Mariam Sheikh. Senator Onyonka Richard Momoima. Senator Oroba Gloria Magoma. Senator Osotsi Godfrey Atieno.
I vote yes.
Senator Recha Julius Murgor. Senator Roba Ali Ibrahim. Senator Seki Lenku Olekana.
I vote no.
Senator Sifuna Edwin Watenya.
I vote yes.
Senator Siengo Beth Kalunda.
I vote yes.
Senator Dhangwa Paul Karungo. Senator Tobiko Peris Pesi. Senator Wafula David Wakoli. Senator Wakili Hillary
I vote no. I vote no.
Senator Wakili Hillary Kiprotich Sige.
Madam Speaker, I vote no.
Senator Wamatinga Wahome. Senator Wambua Enoch Kio.
Is the tally complete? Clerk, can we have the tally if it's ready? Can we have the tally? I want to announce the results of the vote. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. First of all, Senator Murango, when the speaker is on her feet, you first resume your seat. Senator Murango, what is your issue?
Madam Speaker, if you look at those papers, one was grabbed by Mr. Ende and filled both papers, but we are 11-11. So, no, let me talk. That's why I was here. No. So we are not teaching Kenyans. No, we are not allowing resources which has been cooked. Yes. One. Sign. No.
Have you signed?
Okay, Madam Speaker, I have not signed mine.
Clerk.
No, you, Tulia Sifuna. Mos. Yes, you didn't count.
Clerk, can you confirm that tally? Yes. Reconfirm that tally. 2 agents, come here. Come here. Let me give a direction. I did vote. Let me give a direction. I did vote. Reconfirm the vote, clerk, and give me a guide. Your point of order, you are studying orders, studying order 98, the point at which you raise a point of order. After results verification, it looks like it's a tie on 11-11. They have verified.
Madam Speaker,
No, before you announce the tally, Madam Speaker. Before you announce the tally. You know, Madam Speaker, before you announce the tally, Madam Speaker, this afternoon, I want to begin by saying that Majority Leader did very well. You did very well this afternoon. You did very well, and you set the tone. And Madam Speaker, following on that tone, we wanted to have a debate in this House this afternoon. And Madam Speaker, this House, first of all, before we even look at our standing orders, Madam Speaker, we must acknowledge, and you are a lawyer, Madam Speaker, a distinguished lawyer. Madam Speaker, the Constitution in Article 122, 122 sub-article 2 says that on a question proposed for decision in either house, the Speaker has no vote. The Speaker has no vote. And Madam Speaker, if you go to Article 260, which has the definitions of who is a Speaker or not, a Speaker is anybody on the chair. Is a Speaker. And Madam Speaker, So, Madam Speaker, while you are occupying that seat, Madam Speaker, and acknowledging that the Constitution is our supreme law, you should not cast a vote. You are sitting in that chair as a Speaker. Madam Speaker, forget about any other standing order that is contrary to the Constitution. Senator Cheruiyot, any other standing order that is contrary to the provisions of the Constitution is null and void. Is null and void. You cannot create a standing order. You cannot create a standing order that is contrary to the clear provisions of the Constitution. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. So, no. Before you make up your point of order, I'm on a point of order. And you know, I always say that the decisions we make today will bite you tomorrow. Senator Cheruiyot. Yeah. So I beseech you, Madam Speaker, to respect the supremacy of the Constitution. You cannot, if you read, Madam Speaker, if you read High Court Decision 284, the one we filed before the High Court, Madam Speaker, and I can table that decision on the floor. The court said that any standing order that is in contravention of the Constitution is null and void.
What's your point of order? Then I'll make a finding.
Madam Speaker, indeed, the senator for Nyamira has made a point. But the same Constitution, Madam Speaker, defines under the Constitution who is the Speaker. Yes. It defines under the Constitution who is the Speaker. Under the Constitution, there's only one Speaker. But under the standing orders, relax. You know enough. Relax. When you shout...
Can you allow him to finish just the way Senator Mugeni was finishing his submission?
Madam
in
Speaker,
silence.
Madam Speaker, I'm glad you are listening to me. The same Constitution is quoting knows only one Speaker. All the people are creatures who sit in that chair, are creatures of the standing orders. So if you are there by dint of the standing orders, then the standing order that provides that you should vote must be observed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is your... And make it short.
Yeah, I'll be very brief, Madam Speaker, because I don't know why we are fighting over a matter that was long settled in this House, Mr. Speaker. This is not the first time that this point of order is being raised in this House. And it is for that reason, Madam Speaker, if you read the first standing order of the Senate, and I referred to it this afternoon during my statement, you will find that this situation had not been envisioned. But because previously somebody else has risen on a point of order like Senator Omogeni, then we have standing order number 86-6, Madam Speaker, which I want to invite Senator Omogeni to read, because there was need to further define who is the speaker and what happens when one of the senators who has an original vote is on a seat, as you are this afternoon, Madam Speaker. Standing order number 86-6, Senator Omogeni, was written for the kind of situation that we have right now, so that when the speaker or the presiding officer is a senator who has an original vote, the standing order permits them to vote. That is the purpose of this standing order.
I will now rule on the matter so that we are able to proceed to the debate. Under Standing Order 84-3, if you can go there with me, each senator does have a vote. And under Standing Order 86-6, where the presiding officer has an original vote, the presiding officer shall cast his or her vote from the chair. So I will now proceed to rule on the vote. I cast my vote under as per the standing orders, and we will now proceed to announce the tally, and we proceed on. It's a tie. The ayes have 11, the noes. The ayes have 11 and the nays have 11. It's a tie, so the motion is lost. Senator Boni, proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Under Article 98, sergeants, please withdraw the bar. Senator Boni, proceed.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker.
What's your point of order, Senator Okia?
I would like to go back to the Constitution, and I would like to bring to your attention Article 259, Clause 3.
The matter has been ruled on.
B. No, it cannot overrule the Constitution. You are ignorant of the Constitution does not mean the Constitution does not apply. There is a ruling made in ignorance of the law. It's a ruling by incarium, it carries no weight. A ruling made in the ignorance of the law is no ruling. Yes, I agree, and that's why I have to be guided. Look at Article P. Article 259, 3B. Any reference in this Constitution to a state or other public office or officer or a person holding such an office includes a reference to the person acting in or otherwise performing the functions of the office. We cannot disregard the Constitution. We are disregarding the Constitution by saying that the Speaker is voting. Yes. The Constitution overrules the standing order. The Constitution overrules. She's the Speaker. She's acting.
Members.
She's acting.
That
article
order.
is clear.
Honorable members.
Article 259.
Let's have order in the House.
259, Clause 3B. 259, Clause 3B. You cannot overrule the Constitution. Anything made in violation of the Constitution is null and void. Let us respect the Constitution, or we have no business here.
Senator Okia, now resume your seat, please.
This is not activism in law.
Senator Okia. Senator Okia, you are out of order. Senator Okia, you are now out of order. Warning number 1. Resume your seat. Resume your seat. Senator Boni, take the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What is your point of order?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, they have given you.
Anyway, you are sleeping in the house, Chariot. Are you sleeping in the house, Chariot?
Senator Eddy, once you have the floor, you speak to the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in order for Senator Boni to refer to a senator of this House with names that are not the senator's names, including shouting at Senator Okiya Mtata as a mere activist? I wish you have shouted and called Senator Okiya Mtata an activist.
Honorable Senators,
you have called him an activist.
Order, Senators.
Is that in order?
Senator Boni and Senator Murango. Senator Eddy has the floor at the moment. He must be heard in silence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is very clear. But look, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Eddy, if you're not interested in contributing.
I am, but please.
Can you focus?
Mr. Speaker, protect me from the majority leader.
How can I protect you from a laughter?
No, it's not a laughter. He's pointing at me and
proceed.
And threatening me with his hands, Mr. Speaker. I feel threatened, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, we had brought a very serious issue of debates here, and senators who wish to contribute to this issue. And I'm glad that the substantive speaker is back, Mr. Speaker. This is a very serious issue that is of serious national importance. And therefore, when a fellow senator has gotten up to give some clarity to the extent that my brother, Senator Omtata, was just educating some members of this House who have refused to understand the Constitution, like one of the senior senators here. Mr. Speaker, I don't think it's appropriate for him to be referred to the names that are not his. Our standing orders are very clear that when a speaker is in this House, they must be referred to with their names and as senators of this House. So therefore, it's not in order for Senator Boni to refer to a very senior member of this society as Senator Okiya Mtata as a mere activist. And I request you, Mr. Speaker, that may Senator Boni Aluale please withdraw referring to Senator Okiya Mtata as a mere activist. In any case, Senator Okiya Mtata qualified so well, and because of his work as a for this country, he got voted on some serious worth than probably even the senator who has been voted for other reasons of standing so closely with some individuals in power. So he has to respect Senator Okiya Mtata. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni, whenever senator rises and he wishes to refer to another senator, the standing orders are very clear. You refer to your colleagues as Honorable Senator so and so. Kindly, Senator Boni, proceed to withdraw that statement calling the Honorable Senator for Busia, Senator Mtata, a mere activist. Please proceed to withdraw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the record of this House will show that while I had the mic, I have never spoken anything near or close to it. But because we want to make progress, the things I said when I was off the mic, when we were waiting for the division, Madam Speaker, I want the record to be clear.
Let me confirm exactly what your statement was. Senator Boni, just have a seat. I'm informed that when you're making those derogatory remarks, because indeed they are, you are off the mic and you had not been given the floor. Still, it amounts to a disorderly conduct. So just proceed, and it's not on record. It's not on record. So if it's on record, it need not be expunged. But from the chair's point of view, it amounts to a disorderly conduct and that then attracts a caution. And should you proceed in that line again, the chair will ask you to withdraw from the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, indeed, I'm glad that you have been guided correctly. And what I said, this is not a case of activism. But be that as it may, Mr. Speaker, sir, I withdraw and wish to continue. Mr. Speaker, hypocrisy. Mr. Speaker, hypocrisy is a very bad thing. The same Olekina, the people of Narok are waiting for you to attack with gusto.
Honorable Boni Kalwale. Honorable Boni Kalwale. Please. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m. Time to adjourn the House. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Wednesday, 29th March 2023 at 2:30 p.m. And honorable Senators, as I exit, I'll be coming back in the next 3 minutes so that we can prosecute the business of the Kamkunji. Thank you.